wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson had been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, cripes, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. As an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the magpie, which is much bigger, every springtime, the folk in this village need to use the old Aussie trick to stop being swooped. You have to wear an ice cream tub on your head with eyes drawn on the back so they think you're watching them. True story.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good afternoon to you. Just after 1 o'clock on Monday, May the 5th. I'm David Bull, in for Ian Collins. Thanks ever so much for your company on VE Day. Coming up in the programme this afternoon, the European Union has rejected British appeals for access to critical crime and illegal migration databases. It refuses to share fingerprints or data with the United Kingdom, which is a slap in the face for the Prime Minister as he seeks a Brexit reset. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage is threatening legal action to block asylum seekers being housed in areas controlled by Reform UK. The party is pushing to shut down migrant hotels within 100 days following its election victory in 10 local councils. And as you know, VE Day celebrations continue around the United Kingdom as the country marks the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War in Europe. Well, please do get in touch. Alex has been telling me your messages and thoughts and your stories are quite extraordinary. So please do get in touch with all of those. 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word TALK and your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. Well, joining me this afternoon to talk through the big issues of the day is Theo Usherwood, who's a political commentator. Good afternoon, Theo.
Very good afternoon to you, David.
I just want to point out, obviously, VE Day celebrations in full swing around the country, actually, not just in London. And we'll talk more about that in just a second and the poignancy of today and why it's so important that young people are educated as to its significance and importance and the ultimate sacrifice that so many people play. Just very quickly, your thoughts on VE Day and why it's important we mark today, particularly this 80th anniversary. Well, I seem to have lost Theo. I'll get Theo back in just a second. But as I say, celebrations occurring all over the United Kingdom, actually, not just in London. It's really important, actually, that we remember those people who paid the ultimate sacrifice. And actually, as I was saying to Alex, it didn't just affect those people who were called up in terms of conscription, but it also affected families generally and people who were torn apart. And, of course, as we said, the evacuees who were then taken away from their families. And those stories where families were reunited after 4, 5, 6 years, where the children didn't actually recognise their fathers as they returned home at the end of the Second World War. I'll keep an eye on what is happening. We're expecting, we've obviously got the procession which is taking place at the moment. Then we have a fly past, which I believe is in about 40 minutes' time. Let's now just talk more about VE Day celebrations. As I say, they're continuing around the country as the UK marks the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War in Europe. Our correspondent Alicia Fitzgerald is at Buckingham Palace. She's been there today and she's caught up with some of the gatherers.
And my parents fought in the Second World War, and it's just a kind of remembrance, really. Keep it up here.
Hello, hello.
You're very much dressed for the occasion.
Oh, obviously, I love my country. I love what they've done for us, and the allies as well with us. All the Asians, all the Africans, everything. Do you know what I mean? This celebration for everyone, for freedom and peace. That's what it is, do you know what I mean? And let's hope we get some peace in Ukraine very soon, and all the countries fighting. But it's absolutely brilliant. Come all the way from Birmingham. Still knackered, we had to get up at 6 o'clock to get here, but we still don't get a seat, do we?
I was going to say, you've been here a while and you probably can't even see the parade.
I know, that's what I mean, but it's being here, isn't it, darling? Love it, love it, love it. Thank you very much.
And there you are, just one of the people caught up celebrating and commemorating and marking such an important day. Of course, London Cenotaph is the focal point for the quiet reflection when commemorations started. And also, the red arrows will be in the sky. The event started today at 12 o'clock. We believe the red arrows will fly past at about 1:45 this afternoon. Then King Charles and Queen Camilla, they're expected to make an appearance on Buckingham Palace balcony at the military parade today. Also, HMS Belfast is hosting a private VE Day 80th anniversary event. That's also today. 30,000 ceramic poppies are also being unveiled at the Tower of London. The flowers called Blood-Swept Lands and Seas of Red, they originally featured in that particular artwork, if you remember, with 8,888 poppies. And that has been reversioned, and we'll talk more about that later on. Many other celebrations, not just in London, but also around the UK. Theo Usherwood can join me now, I hope. Theo, just very quickly, if I may, before we move on to politics, your thoughts on VE Day, why it's important we remember and respect this event, and particularly the 80th anniversary.
It's incredibly important. Good afternoon. Apologies about what just happened earlier. I mean, it's listening to the radio and this morning, similar to what Alicia was doing, people speaking to people, but also particularly veterans. And there are only a handful left. There are only a very few left. And it's really important, I think, you know, we're constantly struggling to find what it means to be British, our British identity, right? And I think it's incredibly important that we are able to look to our history and look to what that generation gave us. For you and me, we're of a, I imagine your upbringing, you would have had parents, grandparents who would have fought in the war, and you would have been told those stories firsthand about what my grandfather, I remember as a young boy hearing from him what he had to give up. I mean, he survived, but he had to give up when I was, had the fortune of going to university and being in my late teens, early 20s, he had to give it up and go and fight to liberate Europe. And he suffered injuries that would stay with him and hamper him for the rest of his life. And I think it's just very easy for these younger generations to forget the sacrifices that previous generations have given us so that we can enjoy the freedoms and liberties and prosperity that we do today. And I do worry that without those first-hand accounts, and of course that's the way it is, that it's going to be those stories are going to be lost, and people are going to forget the importance of what that generation did, so that we can enjoy everything that we have now. And it is, it's important that we keep telling the stories and that we keep commemorating these moments in our history. But you do worry that when the 90th anniversary comes around, there's going to be no one there who was actually in the moment and had to give up and make those sacrifices. And that, I think, is, that can't be undone, or it can't be changed. But I do worry, that if the stories aren't told, and I think we should all worry that if the stories aren't told, then people will forget.
I couldn't agree more. It was a very different Britain back then, wasn't it? The sense of community, that people actually came together. You looked after your neighbour. Mm-hmm. That seems like a very distant past.
It does. It seems like I remember going as a school child to the Normandy beaches, and it was just the 30th or I think it was the 1990s. That would be the 40th anniversary, and 50th anniversary, I should say. And it felt very real. It was only a generation previously, and those moments, of course, have stuck with me, and they form my own outlook of the world that we live in and the world that I think we all want to live in. But of course, as we head into the deep into the 21st century, those stories get lost, and people forget. People forget the sacrifices made by others. I remember when, and this is going back to my own time as a political editor, when there was in 10 years ago, there was a sort of a moment where I just remember a particular moment where people wanted to sort of debate Winston Churchill, for instance. And they wanted to have a debate about whether Winston Churchill was everything that the history books said of him, a great wartime British leader. And there were those who wanted, particularly on the left, who wanted to portray him as having a dark side to him. And that debate didn't need to happen. Everybody understood, and it was very easy to tell the story and the correct story of Winston Churchill and what he did for this country and leading this country through a very, very dark time. And I slightly worry that when we have this debate in the future, that those voices that stick up for our past and stick up for our history and figures like Winston Churchill will get drowned out. And I do think that there's a real danger in that. And I think also, listening to that lady from Birmingham who was speaking to Alicia, she made a very good point about the sacrifices from around the Commonwealth, people from the lives lost by those from India, from those of the Caribbean, those right across the Commonwealth who gave their lives, and all coming together to commemorate what happened and that war, which cost millions and millions in their lives. And of course, and for want of, it wasn't just those who went to Europe, who fought on the beaches and fought so bravely to liberate Europe, who lost their lives. There was also a generation that came afterwards, and I mentioned, my own grandfather. He took shrapnel to his stomach, and that affected him right up until he died at the turn of the millennium. The sacrifice wasn't just in the moment; it was a sacrifice that lasted right through the trauma, the hurt, the pain, that lasted right through to the end of so many lives. And I just think it's worth us all remembering and coming together and not being ashamed to come together. I saw one Liberal Democrat council describe the celebrations as elitist. Not being ashamed, being proud of what we did and the role that Britain played at the forefront of that liberation. Because it's also worth remembering that, France was under Vichy control. Poland was conquered. The tanks just rolled into Poland, and it was with the support of America that Britain played an absolutely vital, crucial role in ensuring that Hitler's Nazi Germany was defeated.
I'm watching the pictures that we are showing at the moment, and actually, if you get the opportunity to drive or to walk through central London, you can't help but notice the great Union flags that are flying around Regent Street, down the Mall, for example. I get a great sense of pride in being British. And it's interesting, this, and it segues into politics, because Zia Youssef, who is the chair of Reform UK, has said actually what needs to happen in this country is young people need a sense of pride in the United Kingdom. He says Reform UK's mission will be to remoralise young people. You touched on this earlier. The fact is, you've got the woke brigade pulling down statues of our national heroes, trying to actually bury the history of this great country, to underplay what we've actually achieved around the world. You mentioned the Commonwealth there. A third of the world's population. That is significant. It is an amazing achievement, and it is thanks in part, of course, to the late Queen, who made it her life's mission. Reform is saying that essentially we need to remember those great figures like Brunel, like Churchill. I will add other figures into that. Alexander Fleming, for example. Babbage, of course, the founder of the modern computer, and so on. He's right, isn't he?
Yes, absolutely, and nobody. We increasingly want to live in a binary world where you have to take a side, and nobody for one moment is pretending. Nobody for one moment is pretending the Commonwealth was a perfect setup. Right? You don't need to pretend it was a perfect setup. You don't need to pretend that. But what Winston Churchill does, what we have in this country, is by far and away so much better, and we're so fortunate in what we have. And I'm looking at the pictures that you've got here of soldiers from the Household Cavalry marching down Whitehall. We're very lucky in this country, and we have a huge amount to be proud of in terms of our achievements. What Britain has given the world, not just in terms of what I was talking about in terms of World War II and the liberation of Europe, and of course the Great War from 1914 to 1918. But since then, and I think what I also worry about is that if we don't have these moments, if we aren't able to, because I can't think of any off the top of my head, if I'm honest with you, David, if we don't have these moments, these V-Day celebrations, when else do we have a moment for the country to come together? When else do we have a moment for people to hold street parties, to come together in communities and to share a patriotic view or a patriotic love of this country? I'm not sure that there are many opportunities for the rest of this year, indeed until the next celebrations, maybe a jubilee to commemorate, but there are not many opportunities, and I think that we should always be looking to hold a sense of pride in this country. And I think the Americans, for their part, the Stars and Stripes hangs in every classroom, right?
Yes, absolutely.
In the United States, are much better at doing this.
I think we have improved in this country. I'm starting to see the Union flag in many places, in many offices. For example, pictures of the King. This building has a picture of the King downstairs in the reception as well. Just very quickly, what would you say to Neil, who's messaged me from Wales, saying, I know what it is to be British, but now that's classed as far right. Can someone please justify the massive loss of life, as where we are today seems 100% pointless? That's what people are so frustrated about. The fact is that we put together the most extraordinary war effort. We went over and above, that we liberated the free world, that we are celebrating that, commemorating that, and yet the country feels so fragmented and fractured, and many people feel we are in managed decline.
Yes, and it does feel, I think, for many households, for many people up and down the country, the world in front of them, the Britain that they see in front of them, they don't recognise from their childhood. They don't recognise from when they grew up. It feels that everything is changing before them, and I think that breeds a great sense of frustration. I think one of the reasons, if not the main reason why, and it's always it's not always easy linking. Putting 2 and 2 together. There's always a danger you could do 2 and 2 together, end up with 5, right? But I think one of the reasons we saw Nigel Farage and Reform UK do so well last week, and effectively Farage has put Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch on notice in one set of elections, is that people want to feel as if the government of the day, namely in this case a Labour government, understands their concerns about this, and they look to Keir Starmer, and they don't necessarily feel that. And if Keir Starmer is to turn it round for the Labour Party, if Kemi Badenoch is to turn it around for the Conservative Party, they need to really get that. For want of if you look at the success that Boris Johnson had when he led the party, the Conservative Party, to victory in 2019, you did understand that in the moment of that general election in 2019, when the Conservatives won an 80-seat majority, he got it, he understood it, and he embraced it. There was no, you didn't get the feeling that in that moment there was any equivocation from the Conservative Party. And at the moment, there feels like they're having a big conversation about what to do next. But the answer, you would think, in terms of seeing off Reform, is to try and bring that sense of community back. And I think the one danger for the Labour Party right now is that there is a conversation within the Labour Party. You would think, having lost so badly to Nigel Farage, that the obvious thing, it would be obvious to the Labour Party about what they need to do next. And there are those within the Labour Party who recognise where they think that the party needs to go in order to see off Nigel Farage. But this isn't a clear-cut issue for the Labour Party, David. And I think there's going to be a big fight in the coming weeks and months about where the Labour Party goes next. It is not a straightforward conclusion as far as many Labour MPs are concerned, even if there are those advising Keir Starmer in number 10 that actually he needs to make sure that he lands the punches against Nigel Farage.
Theo, thanks for the moment. We'll pick up those points after the break. Just very quickly, lots of messages coming in. Peter says, David, we have lost our identity and patriotism. If you put a Union Jack outside your house, if you love this country, if you want to put its people first, you are labelled far right. Reform will place Union Jacks outside all council buildings, not foreign flags. Our people and flag must come first. Our priority, to make this country great again, to regain its sense of patriotism. Keep those messages coming in. Is Britain worth fighting for? 0344 499 1000.
And it's gone from being a shock every time it happens to almost becoming a new normal, which we can't allow to happen. But you say the BBC aren't helping. It's worse than that. The BBC has contributed massively to the rise in anti-Semitism in this country, and to the precarious position in which the Jewish community in this country now finds itself. For a lot of people who aren't that close to this issue, it might sound like an astonishing thing to say, but, you know, it's borne out by the evidence from day one.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk David Bull in for Ian Collins. I'm joined by Theo Usherwood. Theo, let me just talk to you about this, if I may. The EU, my favourite organisation. Well, the EU has rejected British appeals for access to critical crime and illegal migration databases. This is part of course of Keir Starmer's trying so-called Brexit reset with the bloc. So essentially, Brussels has said the EU cannot, read into that, will not, share information, including fingerprints of illegal migrants, with British police and immigration officials. Basically, this hinges around two things. SIS2, this is Schengen Information System. That gives member states real-time alerts on criminal suspects. Also, the UK will not be able to use the EU's fingerprinting system, that is Eurodac, that has a record of all illegal migrants caught trying to cross into the EU without permission. Now, clearly this is a strategic national threat. You would have thought that given that Keir Starmer is trying to have a reset of relationships with the EU would like to play ball. But as I know only too well, the EU will only do what suits the EU.
Yes, what the EU is doing is playing hardball, David. And so you would think, given the threats, the joint threats that we face with the European Union, whether it be from illegal migration or the threat from Vladimir Putin on our eastern flank, that actually now would be the time to put aside any petty squabbles and just get on and find a solution that stops us, that brings us all together to fight common problems. But no, the EU are deciding to dig their heels in on actually what's quite an important issue in terms of fingerprint sharing. I mean, the Home Office, sources in the Home Office have, told the Times that actually if European, security services would share this information, the powers that be in Europe would share this information, we could make some significant headway together. But of course, what they want to do is they want to withhold that information and then throw into the mix. And this is what you can expect to happen. I'm not saying it will happen, but this is what I think will happen, is that they will throw into the mix fishing rights. They'll throw into the mix a youth mobility scheme. And they'll say, if you give us what we want when it comes to that youth mobility scheme, or if you cede territorial waters when it comes to fishing rights, then we'll share fingerprint data with you, and then we can move forward with a security agreement.
But obviously, don't you just think this is pathetic and it's puerile when we are facing a significant national terror threat? Literally days after we saw the police and counter-terrorism police foil a very, very complex terrorism case in this country. It's crazy, but we saw it with the European Defence Fund. The Europeans created 150 billion euro defence fund of money that they had brought together. We've got some fantastic defence companies in this country who would be eager to access that defence fund to build the technology, produce the technology and the weaponry and the arsenal necessary to see off Vladimir Putin. But of course, the European Union turned around and said, no, we're not going to allow that to happen because you're not part of our defence and security agreement, and we're not going to allow that to happen because your defence companies, Britain, would benefit from such contracts. We're not going to allow that to happen until you cede on fishing rights and
anything else that we might want.
And you wonder why, Theo, we wanted to leave. It's this kind of petty arguing that underpinned part of the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. It's what underpinned the problem. But they've taken the view that they're still fighting petty battles and squabbles going back to nearly 10 years now to the referendum. You know, the threats that Europe face, and you rightly mentioned, of course, it's going to be subject to legal proceedings, so we'll all be very careful about what we say.
Indeed.
But you know, the threat the threat that counter-terrorism police foiled in conjunction with our security services is significant, and I'm sure it will come out in due course. But when it comes to these security threats, you know, these aren't just threats to Britain alone. These are threats that we have seen played out in Germany, in France, in other parts of Europe as well. And, you know, I think on that level, we should all be working together. But, you know, Europe faces an existential threat from Putin. And, you know, you'd have thought that we all would want to work together to come together, you know, to ensure that Europe is properly defended. But even then, they're arguing about, well, we need to use it as an opportunity, as a leverage to score points on fishing rights or whatsoever. It is not we need to enter. Europe needs to enter, but I don't hold any hope that it will do so. But it needs to enter a sort of new mindset about how we're going to move forward in these incredibly dangerous times.
I mean, it's extraordinary when you actually listen to what the EU says. They say it's not that they can't do it, it's the fact they won't do it. Because, according to them, and the wording is, it would set a precedent.
Yeah, I know. They think that if we score a point on, you know, sharing fingerprint data now, that we'll come back and ask for a freebie later on. But I don't think it works like that. I think it would work best on the basis of, if you share, like the same as the Five Eyes security agreement with America, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. We all come together, we all share our data, our intelligence, everything that we've gathered, all of the intelligence we've gathered, and we put it into a pool, and then we can work together to see off threats jointly within the Five Eyes agreement. And I think that I could understand the European Union saying that they don't want to share fingerprint data if we're saying we don't want to share fingerprint data with them. But I think that it's perfectly possible for the European Union and the European, you know, security services to share the relevant data, as long as we are prepared to put everything that we know around the threat from, you know, these criminal gangs running illegal migration rackets and human trafficking rackets across Europe with the Europeans as well. That's the point of leverage, not something way out on a tangent when it comes to fishing rights or you know, immigration scheme to help young people work and study abroad. That shouldn't be part of the conversation.
No, very well said, Theo. Really good to talk to you as well. Theo Usherwood there, political commentator. A question I want to ask you this afternoon occurred to me whilst I was preparing for the show. Whose side is the EU actually on? Let me just leave that with you. The number 0344 499 1000. Which side do you think the EU is on when it comes to illegal migration? Also, you can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. We'll be celebrating and marking VE Day as well after the break, as well as much more. Don't go anywhere. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
David Bull in for Ian Collins. Thanks ever so much for your company. Let's talk about illegal migration, because Reform UK councils will launch legal action within 100 days to close migrant hotels. This is according to Zia Youssef. He is the party's chairman. He was interviewed on the BBC. Let's pause and take a look at what he said.
There are instruments of power available to us.
Well, like what?
Judicial reviews, injunctions. There's planning laws. You know, a lot of these hotels, and there has been litigation around this already. A lot of these hotels, when you suddenly turn them into something else, which is essentially a hostel, that falls foul of a number of regulations, and that's what our teams of lawyers are exploring at the moment. And we can look at budgets as well. So the word we used was resist. Look, we're not in government yet. That's our plan, and that's why people watching this programme who believe in these values, who don't want to live around people whose first action upon coming to this country was to break our laws and then to live at the behest of taxpayer money.
So that's Zia Youssef, the chairman of Reform UK, talking to Laura Koonsberg on the BBC. Just to clarify that, Zia Youssef said it would use the local authorities to fight government in the courts if necessary to reduce the numbers housed in the areas. So he mentioned there judicial reviews, court injunctions, planning disputes, for example. He also talked about migrants breaking the law. Now, over the past few months, we've talked about a lot of these asylum seekers being housed in places like RAF, Wethersfield and Scampton. And joining me now is Nathan Robbins. He's Reform UK's Braintree interim chair and nearby resident of Wethersfield. Good afternoon to you, Nathan.
Good afternoon, David.
So this is sort of twofold. Firstly, in terms of policy, you've got Zia Youssef saying, right, OK, within 100 days, we're going to close all of these hotels. I've seen it firsthand, what this does to communities. The fact is, you've got places like Ipswich, which had 3 hotels full of migrants, decimating the town centre, people too frightened to go out. You've got groups of young men marauding around town centres. But you come at this from another aspect as well, not just that political side, but also you are a nearby resident of Wethersfield, and you and I were talking on the telephone a couple of days ago, and you mentioned to me what it's like in terms of the impact that Wethersfield has had on your local area. Do you want to tell everyone what you told me?
Yeah, so we've got situations where we have immigrants walking down a 60-mile-an-hour road, no high visibility jackets, no easy way to see them. And obviously to us, we understand the dangers of that. We understand that walking on a 60-mile-an-hour road where you've got lorries driving at 50 miles an hour is not safe. You've got young girls that are scared to go out in the village of Wethersfield. There's reports that when police cars drive through the villages, they have to turn their sirens off not to alarm the illegal immigrants on the base, which I think is just wrong. I think why are we having to make these adjustments for them? I think the fact that we've got people that won't even walk their dogs in the winter months in the dark because they are worried, they don't know who is going to be there. And I think the fact that James Cleverly has failed on every level to do anything in the local area is appalling.
And he's the local MP.
He's a local MP, yes. I mean, originally the plans were for 1,700 illegal immigrants to be housed at the base, and he did say and lobby that was too many illegals to be housed there. But we're still at 580 people, which I believe is more people than that are actually housed in the village that have lived there for their lives. And when we go back to where this all started, we had RAF families that had lived, some of them that had lived there for years and years, that were evicted to make way for these illegal immigrants to come on. And when we look at some of the cost that has been spent on this airbase, I believe that it's actually owned by the Ministry of Housing committees and local government, not the Home Office, which was a shock to me. A lot of people thought that it was owned by the Home Office, but it's not. And the land registry shows that the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government brought the airbase for £34 million, which is just, when we think that that is taxpayers' money that they have spent on purchasing this airbase. Not only that, you've got the cost of keeping them daily in this space. And when we look at where they're housing them in hotels, where they're costing £50,000+ a year, I believe it is, per migrant, it is absolutely appalling that this is where taxpayers' money is going. Whilst we've got pensioners that are having their winter fuel allowance taken away, we've got farmers that are being taxed to the hilts. It is appalling that the government is choosing to put people that have come here illegally. They have already broken our laws. They have entered the country illegally, but yet we still put them on a pedestal.
For those people who are listening to what you're saying and thinking, well, actually, this is a terrible overreaction, that we've essentially got young men who are allowed out, they are allowed freedom of access to roam. Are you overreacting? Are the young women of that area overreacting when they see swarms of young men approaching them?
No, I don't think it's an overreaction at all. And we have to remind ourselves that these are not women and children. These are young, fit men that, and I think as we look at VE Day today, and we look at the sacrifice that the men of this country made to keep our country safe, I think that coming from, if they have a legitimate claim to asylum, that they're fleeing a war-torn country, the men in this country stayed and fought for our country. Why aren't these same men doing it for their country? I just think it's wrong on every level to flee a country that is at war. You should be staying and fighting. If our grandparents and ancestors fled this country back in World War II, we would not be here today.
I mentioned Ipswich earlier. I was really shocked by what I saw. The fact is I saw gangs of youths that were congregating in the town centre. I heard testimonials from people who said they were too frightened to go out. I heard from shopkeepers who said that actually they were too frightened to open their businesses. There is no doubt that the centre of Ipswich has been changed dramatically. What are the stories that you're hearing, particularly from young women who want to go out, who want to go and enjoy a drink or go to the pub or just socialise generally?
Yeah, so from people that I've heard from and the stories that I've heard is that they are genuinely scared, especially if you live in Wethersfield, that you don't feel safe. They don't feel safe. For example, you've got elderly women that might like to walk their dogs in the evenings. Well, in the winter months, they just don't feel safe doing that after dark because you don't know who's there. And there has been stories where young girls have been chased back to their properties by men from the base. There's been several accounts where their illegals have been spotted in people's gardens trying to gain access to properties. It is just appalling, and there is nothing being done about it. The media coverage on this is just not there. It is being hushed up and kept quiet.
Nathan, really good to talk to you. Nathan Robbins there, Reform UK's Braintree interim chair and nearby resident of Wethersfield. Well, let's now get the opinion of Henry Bolton, who's the SDP's Foreign Affairs, Defence and Security spokesperson. Good afternoon to you.
Hello, David. Hi.
Henry, you and I know each other well. We've talked about this a great deal. But listen, the account from Nathan there, I've seen it with my own eyes. Nathan talking about the impact of asylum seekers, illegal migrants in the middle of Britain, in small villages in the middle of England, a real threat, or at least a perceived threat, to not just young women, young men, elderly women, to the indigenous population. And no one is talking about it.
I know, David, I started raising this issue in 2012, and when I was actually working for the European Union in Brussels, and one of the tasks I had there was I was portfolio holder for civilian, non-military border management, believe it or not, and I started raising the alarm then, both here in the UK and over there. I've been trying to raise the alarm ever since. Successive governments have utterly failed the British people to get ahead of the curve and to deal with this existential threat. And what Nathan described very well is we're seeing this playing out on our streets every day. I live in Folkestone. We've got at least 3 locations in this town where we've got these people. Culturally, their behaviour is not what you would expect from people who sort of are from a British society.
What do you mean by that?
Nathan talked about walking down the roads, to hanging around schools, this sort of thing. their attitude towards human hygiene on the streets. I don't want to get too vivid about that, but you know what I'm talking about. So we've got a whole range of problems there. People are intimidated. Everything Nathan says is correct. But you know what, David? I'm getting really tired and bored with, not bored, that's the wrong word, I'm frustrated with politicians in this country talking about the problem. The problem. We all damn well know what the problem is. What we need is sensible, well thought through plans for solving this. And I have to say, whilst I absolutely sympathise, I'm part of the movement that says we don't want these people in our communities for all sorts of reasons. Plus, we don't know who they are. We've just had 8 men arrested yesterday. 7 of them confirmed as Iranian. We don't know how they got here, so I'm not going to speculate. But they've been arrested reportedly because they were planning a terrorist attack within hours. Today is VE Day. Our homeland.
And I must just pause and interject there. Of course, we're seeing the fly past as we speak across the Mall and Buckingham Palace. You mentioned it's VE Day. We are celebrating, commemorating those people who paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom, and yet we are not free.
Yeah, David, exactly. But, I want solutions. Now, I have got solutions. Nobody wants to listen to them. I've put them to Reform. I've put them to the government. I've put them to 3 prime ministers and 3 home secretaries. Nobody wants to listen. Nobody wants to do the difficult politics of the solutions, because the solutions become more and more draconian every day that passes and the problem becomes more embedded. The SDP policy is and has been for some time to detain illegal immigrants the moment they get onto British shores if we are unable for logistical reasons to return them immediately. Detain them securely and detain them until such time as we can deport them or return them, or they ask to go back, whichever is the sooner. Now, that's the policy. There's more detail to that, of course, but that's the policy. No one else seems to be, no other party, including Reform, is picking up on that. And
I'm not sure that's true, actually, to be fair. Reform's policy is very much to pick them up, deport them, have a minister of deportation.
Right, but David, there is no plan behind that. And I fully sign up to those sentiments. I've just said pretty much exactly that. I fully sign up to that intention. But an intention, the Conservative Party threw intentions at us for 14 years. They made promises. They said what they were going to do. They never had a plan for doing it. Brexit, we never had a plan for what was going to follow.
Well said.
So we have got the same situation now from just about every political party. I'm sorry to say it, and I say it because I want it to change, Reform included. The headlines are great, but the actual planning detail, how to do it, has not been thought through. So, for example, just on this policy, which I fully sympathise with, but it's not the right solution. If we close the hotels now or in the next few months in some areas, what is going to happen to the people in those hotels?
Well, they want to put them in accommodation, don't they, in houses, which they will be right next door to people who are paying their bills.
But if Reform were to do that...
Oh, I see.
So what is Reform's plan for what happens to those people? Now, I haven't heard that. Now, are they going to be displaced into those areas that don't have the same approach? Well, and I understand that Andrea Jenkins, who's a friend of mine, but I haven't spoken to her since she was elected, although I sent her congratulations, she said that they could go and live in tents near Dover. Well, I'm sure the good people of Dover do not want an influx of people from her part of the world down into Dover. This is not a solution. We will end up with them being even less controlled.
But Henry, isn't the answer that you have secure detention centres, you have cross-party consensus, you make sure you have rapid processing, and you get people who are not entitled to be in this country out?
This is what I've said. This is what I said earlier on, David. So that's absolutely the answer. But the people in this country have to recognise that that solution cannot be applied by local government. It has to be applied by central government. And, there is a misunderstanding of that amongst all sorts of people in society because, unfortunately, our education system is seriously flawed as well and people aren't taught this. But there is a distinct separation of powers, if you like, between local and national levels. What we have to do is put pressure on Starmer and the Home Office, not to, to deal with a hotel problem particularly, but to stop these bloody boats coming across the channel in the first place. Now, that's what needs to be done, because otherwise we continue to firefight in the United Kingdom. We will continue to worry about where we're putting these people. We will continue to worry about the security problems, and we will continue to bear the financial cost of this as well as the criminal cost. So the only way is to stop, not turn them back, not push them back, not accommodate them when they're here, but to actually stop them before they cross the English Channel. That is the only way to do this. And there are ways of doing it. It's been done in the past in other countries.
Like Australia.
Well, Australia, yes, people look at Australia. There are some lessons to be learnt there, but their migration dynamic is very different.
So what would you do? Sorry, I have to go to a break. What would you do? Put the Royal Navy in the channel?
No, very, very quickly, if you send every single person whose feet touch British shores is moved straight to a quick welfare check, biometrics taken, ship them to Ascension, which is the SDP policy, ship them to a
Ascension Island, are you talking about?
Ascension Island in the mid-Atlantic, to a secure detention facility there. I tell you what, before you've reached about 2,000 people there, the boats will go. The boats will stop if they understand that robustness is being applied, and every single person who touches British shores, having come across the channel, is going straight down there. Their feet don't touch the ground. They go down there until such time as we can get rid of them. Either they ask to go back, or we're able to deport them and return them that way. So that's one solution, but there's a suite of solutions that need to be applied. It's a long story, but I'm sure we'll talk about that in the future. But what I want to see, what I'm desperate to see from the political leadership of this country, and I don't care what party it is, although I think the SDP is on message on this. It is. I'm designing the policy. But what I want to see is solutions. I want to see these damn boats
I think we all do, Henry. Henry, sorry, I have to interject. Really good to talk to you, as always. That's Henry Bolton, the SDP's Foreign Affairs, Defence and Security spokesperson. Your calls, thoughts and messages after this break.
Well, firstly, you're absolutely right. They were fantastic local election results. We knew there was the opportunity for us to do quite well in a number of places that had elections, but to actually take outright control of 10 county councils, 2 combined authority mayors, and of course the Runcorn and Helsby by-election, which, let's not remember, that was one of Labour's safest seats in the country. The majority that they were defending in that seat was bigger than the majority Keir Starmer has in his own constituency in Holborn and St Pancras. That's the scale of the challenge that we were up against.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Those incredible scenes, the Red Arrows actually flying across central London, the spectacular flypast to mark 80 years, of course, since victory in Europe Day. There are 9 Hawk jets. As you saw, they released those colours, red, white and blue, of course, the colours of the Union flag. Today's aerial salute really is the centrepiece of the commemorations, paying tribute to those who fought and fell during the Second World War. Of course, it's a powerful moment of national pride and remembrance. Now, of course, not just the Red Arrows there, but also a Lancaster, also a Spitfire, a Hurricane flying alongside state-of-the-art Typhoons and F-35 fighter jets. Now, actually, the route and the way and the logistics and the actual sheer precision to make sure that that flypast took place is quite extraordinary. The route actually began at RAF Waddington in Lincolnshire and continued via Colchester, East London, and then they came together over the Olympic Park and then finally headed over the Palace and heading out towards Surrey and Hampshire. I can tell you this is one of the largest ceremonial flypasts in recent years, and of course it's a dramatic tribute to those who secured peace in Europe 80 years ago today. Well, joining me on the phone is Steve, who's calling in from Leeds. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dr. David.
Hello, nice to talk to you. It's such a powerful day, isn't it? I'm just so struck by the stories of courage, people who gave up everything, those who paid the ultimate sacrifice, and I suppose also the way the country came together. Yeah,
but David, the reason I called is, look, you've got veterans sleeping in doorways.
I know,
looking
absolutely.
Up at that fly past, yeah?
It's appalling.
But at the same time, we've got migrants coming in getting everything free, hotel, council tax, food, clothes, medical care. And I mean, my father died when he was 42, right? He joined the army at 18, left at 40, yeah? So he's done his 21 years. He got shot twice in the army, once in Malaya, once in Ireland. And my mother was told when he was 42, he died too young, so you're going to get half his pension, right? So she retired at 76, having worked from the age of 14. She was born in 1937. And because my father's army pension was added to her income, she got taxed on it.
I mean, that's unacceptable.
I would much prefer politicians who lay a wreath on the cenotaph to walk 5 streets back and talk to a veteran sleeping in a doorway and say, you know what, we'll look after you.
I totally agree. I've got friends who left the forces, who fell into all sorts of trouble because they lost the structure, turned to drugs and alcohol, have ended up homeless, sleeping rough, and of course the state doesn't care.
Yeah, look, I'm a Reform voter. If Reform came out tomorrow and said every serviceman that serves his full time, 21 years, man or woman, we will pay as a nation for your council tax, your home, your rent, your electric and your gas, you know what, I'd be happy to do that, and I'm a higher rate taxpayer.
I think many people in the country would. Steve, thank you very much for your call. Sorry, time is very tight. Thank you for that. Keep your stories coming in, please, about VE Day and what it means to you. Also, I'm going to be talking about illegal migrants flocking to Britain for easy money, of course, delivering takeaways to us in various capitals and towns across the UK. Also, it's our political digest coming up with Reem Ibrahim, Communications Manager at the Institute of Economic Affairs, after the break.
we've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Showbiz years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, cripes, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. Just after 2 o'clock on Monday, 5th of May. I'm David Bull in for Ian Collins. Well, coming up this hour, VE Day celebrations continue around the United Kingdom as the country marks the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War in Europe. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage is threatening legal action to block asylum seekers being housed in areas controlled by Reform UK. The party is pushing to shut down migrant hotels within 100 days following its election victory in 10 local councils. And Prime Minister Keir Starmer must tear up Labour's pledge not to raise taxes to see off an existential threat from Nigel Farage. That's according to a former Cabinet Minister. Do get in touch on everything we're talking about. The number 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can also text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X as well at talkTV. Well, a very warm welcome. Thanks ever so much for your company on what is really an historic day, of course, celebrating VE Day, the 80th celebration of VE Day victory in Europe. An incredibly poignant day, actually, and many of your stories coming in are really quite extraordinary. We'll talk about those in just a little while. But joining me now is Reem Ibrahim, who's Communications Manager at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Reem, always good to talk to you.
Hello, good morning, David.
Well, you are much younger than me. I don't obviously remember the war. I'm too young, but I can live vicariously through my parents and their experiences. My father served in the army. He was called up to serve in the army. My mother tells me stories about how they were actually sent away. Obviously, many children were sent away around the country when war broke out, and of course the evacuations that took place. I'm thrilled, actually, to see quite the numbers of people on the Mall who are marking this occasion. I was concerned that, actually, given that many young people don't seem to know very much at the moment about our history or our past, or are embarrassed about the past of Britain, that we wouldn't have those kind of attendance numbers. But I was wrong.
Yes, you're absolutely right. What's interesting is there seems to be a resurgence of younger people that actually are fighting back against this kind feeling that we shouldn't be proud of this country and what it has achieved. I really enjoyed watching the King and the royal family watch the fly past over from Buckingham Palace's balcony. I thought that was really lovely, and I think a brilliant commemoration as well. Fundamentally, I do think you're right. There is this kind of reaction against this idea that we shouldn't be proud of this country, that we shouldn't be proud of the history and proud of what we fought for, what our historic people have fought for, and ultimately that is freedom. That is freedom to live in this country in the way that we choose without other countries imposing that on us. And I think it's wonderful that we're able to celebrate that. But of course, remember the real horrors of war and the fact that we don't want to go back to that.
Quite right, well said. Now, what do you make of what Zia Youssef has said, of course, the chair of Reform UK? He says that actually young people need a sense of pride in the United Kingdom, that actually we need to teach them this country is a great country. We have achieved amazing things over the years. I mean, I hear a great deal about the woke side of being embarrassed about British history. We've seen statues torn down. No one is being told actually what this country has achieved. Those great figureheads like Churchill, for example, like Fleming, like Nightingale. Do you think that actually we need to restore pride in Britain and actually teach British history, which is pertinent to young people growing up today in Britain?
Absolutely, it is so pertinent to young people today for them to understand that, because it's so far removed. I mean, you just spoke a bit about that, David, the generations of your parents and your grandparents, but actually for basically most of Gen Z, a lot of them won't have people in their lives that have experienced this history. The last 20, 30 years have been relatively stable. And so for many of them, with new technologies and the inability to really grasp what it was like to have your entire livelihoods threatened by external foreign governments. And ultimately, this is what this is about. It's about being proud of fighting for not just your country, but the principles that uphold this country. And I think that's really important. Now, what Zia Youssef said is absolutely right. I mean, there seems to be this kind of reaction against that kind of woke feeling that the UK isn't somewhere to be proud of. I've got to say, though, I think a lot of it is naivety. A lot of young people want to be seen to be doing the right thing. They want to be seen to be a good person. And so when they hear this stuff about, whether it be the pro-Palestine movement or the trans movement, whatever it is, it's kind of be kind stuff, despite the fact that their own instincts and their own logic tells them that this stuff is incorrect. What actually happens is this feeling of social shaming. And so as a young person, you always want to fit in. When everybody else is saying this stuff, you want to feel as though you're part of that. Now, I remember that when I was in school, and it was just after the lockdown period where we had the Black Lives Matter stuff. All of my friends were posting on their Instagram, Blackout Tuesday, supporting the Black Lives Matter organisation. And I felt the pressure to do the same thing. But as soon as I dug a little bit deeper, I realised that these organisations are really anti-British. And fundamentally, they are anti-capitalist. They are anti-free economic exchange. They were socialists. And so I think it really takes a level of critical thinking. Now, what Zia Youssef is effectively saying is that we need to instill those values in young people, but also ensure that there is that level of critical thinking and that individuals are able to think for themselves rather than feel pressure from everywhere else to behave or think a certain way.
You see, I think there's something else really interesting here. Of course, Zia Youssef is a Muslim, and he is pushing the message that second, third, fourth generation British people should be proud to be British, and I agree.
Yes, and I'm in that category. I'm a third generation Brit. My grandparents came to this country from North Africa between the 60s and the 70s, and I am part of that generation in which I have, a very, very little sort of connection to my North African heritage, and that I didn't grow up there. I love the food. I do love the culture, but I am fundamentally British. And so it does mean that for somebody like me, it's very difficult to have that kind of identity crisis in some ways. And I think what's really wonderful is that Zia is in so many ways a representative of those kind of communities in which you can be from second, third generation immigrant family and be incredibly proud to be British.
And what do you make of these comments that I'm just getting in? Nick says, I've just watched that vile Starmer fawning over those brave veterans. How dare he? He hates everything to do with Britain and the British people. How dare he? Alison in Kent says, hi, David, I feel sick seeing Starmer chatting to veterans. Same Starmer who took away their winter fuel allowance. Same government that takes their houses away if they need to go into care. No free four-star luxury for them. What a hypocrite. A lot of anger out there.
There is a lot of anger, I think, especially from that generation of people. I think the winter fuel payments issue is slightly separate. I think that fundamentally that's a question of government spending. I mean, it really was a drop in the bucket in comparison to what the government wastes as a whole. But I do think there seems to be...
But they're not. But they are connected, because he is saying thank you for your service, but by the way, I'm allowing you to be cold in the winter, to freeze to death.
I wouldn't say that was necessarily the case. I mean, how many pensioners do we know that have actually frozen
Well,
to
I
death?
know lots of people who've actually messaged into this programme, other programmes as well, saying they can't afford to keep the heating on. So elderly people sitting in front of a one-bar electric fire because that's all they've got. I mean, that's unacceptable in a developed country like Britain.
It is unacceptable, and those people would have been eligible for pension credit. I mean, I don't agree with the government's decision to do it so quickly before winter. I mean, really, when we're talking about government savings here,
Sure.
This was nothing, and they lost so much political capital. It should have been means tested, and those pensioners that actually cannot afford to heat their homes should have been able to receive so much more support when they needed to. But the problem is they didn't communicate it to the public immediately, and it was announced October, November, so it was so close to winter, and so many people weren't receiving
And the
that
cut-off
message.
date was very close, wasn't it, as well, in terms of trying
was.
to apply for it. Let's talk about this, though. You may have noticed there were elections recently. That's why I've been away. I've been a bit busy. And obviously, Reform UK did very well, taking control of 10 councils, 2 mayoralties, as we know, a new Member of Parliament as well. Keir Starmer, this is the bit that I just can't get my head around. Keir Starmer says, OK, I get it, and then clearly doesn't get it because he continues down the pathway, his plan for change, more plan for change. He doesn't seem to understand that actually what the public is saying to him is actually stop, reverse, go another way. So this is a very interesting story which is in the Times this morning. So Keir Starmer must tear up Labour's pledge not to raise taxes to see off an existential threat from Nigel Farage. This is Louise Hay. She is a former cabinet minister. She is basically saying to the Prime Minister, stop, reverse, go a different direction, or you are in big trouble.
It's absolutely the wrong approach. I mean, let's be very clear about this. The fact that they are even considering raising taxes and they think that that's in some way going to cause some kind of investment that's going to fund serious public services. I mean, fundamentally, people are sick to death of having all of their money taken by the government and being misspent. I don't want my taxpayer money to be spent on millions of civil servants that are literally simply just pen pushers. We know that in local councils there is so much waste. And I think that that's the point, right? We don't want this money to be spent in this way. I think fundamentally, individuals, the people that actually work for their money, know how to spend it better than the government does. And the government should absolutely reduce taxes, not be considering raising it.
I would agree with that. Now, actually, it was so disingenuous because they came into the election saying they weren't going to raise taxes for working people and then promptly put up national insurance employers' contributions. Now, clearly, if you're going to do something, surely it would have been better to say, OK, we're going to put a penny on income tax, because actually there wouldn't have been the kickback that they now are getting.
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually. This is an interesting conversation about where tax is actually being taken from. So, of course, when you increase employers' national insurance contributions, what the government was saying then is, well, hold on, we're taxing employers, we're not taxing employees. But anybody that runs a business, anybody that understands how business works, knows that if you make employing somebody more expensive, you are going to reduce the chances that they're even employed in the first place. You're going to slow their wages. You're going to ensure that actually in some cases there are going to be job losses. So really what this conversation is about is where the impact of tax is compared to the incidence of the tax. That's who is paying it in the short term, but who is actually paying it in the long term. And that is working people. But even immediately from that, I mean,
I'm sick of this thing, working people. Everyone works.
Yes. They do, but also this working people thing is entirely irrelevant. Any definition of working people, if they're even saying working class people, let's be very clear, they have increased taxes on working class people.
They have.
They also, by the way, it's interesting with the sin tax stuff. I mean, very recently the government was looking at increasing the sugar tax, even though it has had absolutely no impact whatsoever on obesity rates. And then it will make things more expensive for, quote unquote, working people.
Yes.
But yet this idea that if it's going to reduce calories by a day, one calorie a day, it means that they're going to then do that, but effectively trying to increase the size of the nanny state. This is nannying. This is the government increasing its size. It the government intervention. The fact that Louise Haigh thinks that the solution to the government's woes is to increase the size of the state and tax people even more is absolutely insane.
But I said to younger people recently, I'm old enough to remember this. This is what Labour does when it gets into power. It has always done it. It's always increased tax. It always increases the size of the state, and then it bankrupts the country, and then someone has to pick up the mess.
Yeah, and unfortunately that is the case, but a lot of young people haven't experienced that. I mean, I don't remember the 1990s. I don't remember what it was like to go into a Labour government. I don't remember what the election promises were. I've studied it. I've seen the election campaign videos.
I remember the 70s, Reem. Also, what do you make to this? Because Emma Lewell, a Labour backbencher, said the government had made unnecessary choices, which I think we agree with, which has cost the party at the ballot box. She said, and I thought that I did chuckle when I read this, Labour needed a change of plan rather than a plan for change.
Yes, they did need a change of plan, or perhaps a different party in government overall. I think fundamentally this is about the question of what the state should be doing, and these are where these conversations are happening. I mean, in some areas the government are doing great things. I mean, with planning regulation, they rolled back a lot of that, which has meant that they've been able to build a lot of homes. So credit where credit is due. But this is a drop in the bucket. This is such a small thing in comparison to everything else they're doing. Rachel Thieves talks a lot about growth, talks a lot about the importance of economic growth. And I believe she wants it, but I don't believe that she knows how to get there, because everything we see that the government
she has a clue.
Actually doing is the opposite.
So it's really interesting. So Labour has decided that what they're going to do is they're going to carry on down the same path which gave them a great big kicking in the general in the elections that we've just had. And now some bright spark in the Labour Party has decided that the way to defeat Reform UK, and they have identified that Reform UK is a threat to them, they are going to ramp up its attacks on Nigel Farage's Putin fawning. So essentially what they're going to do is they're going to concentrate on comments that Nigel Farage made some 10 years ago when he said he admired Putin. I think that's all he said. And now they've decided this is their best attack line. Wouldn't their best attack line be to actually look at their own policies, to decide what isn't working in their own house, and then to make amends?
Yeah, absolutely. And fundamentally, those comments were a very long time ago. They were before even the annexation of the Crimea. So I think there are conversations to be had about whether or not respect for other foreign leaders. Of course, we know there's a trade-off, right? There are so many foreign leaders that I don't think the UK government necessarily are aligned with, but we talk about them in positive ways because it's what's best for this country. I don't think Nigel would make those comments today, and I think that's really the point here. The fact that the Labour Party and Keir Starmer and the government as a whole seem to think that the solution is to point fingers at other party members rather than themselves look at what is going wrong. Why are people disappointed in them? I mean, they got a huge majority last year. People generally believed in what the government were doing, and they believed in their plan for change. They wanted a change from the last 14 years of so-called conservative governments, where we've had incredibly high taxes and slow economic growth. And yet they have completely and utterly failed. They lied to the public when they said they weren't increasing taxes on working people. They lied to the public when they said they were going to achieve large amounts of economic growth through state expansion. Fundamentally, all of these promises have been broken, and it's because the approach was wrong. I mean, I think economic growth is something we should be aiming for, but you don't get there by increasing huge amounts of regulations on employers. You don't get there by making work so much more expensive, and you don't get there by taxing things like sugar even more so that working people can barely afford to eat. This is the point.
Well, I think there's one other thing here, Reem, as well, which is the cost of energy, because there is no developed country that has actually managed to succeed and grow with high energy costs. And, of course, what we need to do is to bring down the cost of energy. And yet, you've got Keir Starmer and the Labour cabinet who are going full steam ahead into net zero by 2030, which is some arbitrary target. You've got people like Blair coming out with that intervention just before the election. And now this morning in the papers, you've now got Lord Blunkett also saying, actually, this is electorally toxic. And yet the Labour government presses on.
Yeah, this is really interesting, actually, the story in the Telegraph where Lord Blunkett was saying that the net zero push does risk making Labour toxic to so many voters. And I think what's interesting about this is I think it's also applied to the Conservative Party. I don't think people trust either of the main uniparties on these kind of issues, especially when it comes to energy security. I mean, it is quite literally economics 101. If you increase the supply of something, then the price comes down. If you want low energy costs, you need to increase the supply of energy. And that only comes from things like drilling. We need to ensure that North Sea oil and gas is being used whilst we have it. And in the long term, nuclear energy. I think nuclear is absolutely the solution. We need to be building more reactors, and that is something that some parties have been supportive of. I really hope to see that happen, but that is only going to be achieved if we start building tomorrow. It's only going to really be reaping the costs of that in the next 7 to 10 years. So what we really need in the short term is to use the resources that we have, increase the supply of energy by drilling North Sea oil and gas, and then in the longer term, look to increasing the amount of nuclear energy that we can actually be using. Look at countries like France, they've been able to do it, and it means that they have cheap, more abundant energy that is good for the environment.
Reem, always good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Reem Ibrahim, their Communications Manager at the Institute of Economic Affairs. So I'm asking this afternoon, lots of questions actually. Is Britain worth fighting for? Also, just in terms of the EU refusing to share data on illegal migrants coming to this country, whose side is the EU actually on? Also, your thoughts about VE Day as well, as we mark a very significant day indeed in British history. The number 0344 499 1000. Your turn after the break.
What was that, Mike? What was that?
Oh, my God. Well,
does this man have anyone protecting him in the media space? I mean, where's your publicist that steps in and says, we promised you 10 minutes, it's been 30?
Yeah.
I mean, I could go on and on when it comes to the contradictions, when it came to the oversharing.
Yeah.
This is the third time the man has told us that his father doesn't take his calls anymore, by the way. Don't forget, in the Netflix series, Meghan actually says Harry lost his dad.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk just after 20 past 2 on Monday, May the 5th. Let's take some calls now. Tarquin is in London. Good afternoon, Tarquin.
David, brilliant show.
Oh,
Obviously,
thank
it's
you.
great that you're even better.
Thank you very much, very kind.
Right. Yeah, you've got a lot of talking points today. And,
Yes.
The one I actually rang in, I had to remind. I'm getting a bit senile myself. What it was this strange schism, this dichotomy where you can fly the Union flag or the St George's flag on a day like today, but you try putting that in your front garden tomorrow, and you get a visit on the front door, not from the cops, won't you? You racist! What? You're a far right thug, and all this. What's going on, David?
So when did that happen? Because, yes, I agree about the Union flag, but even more so with the St George's flag.
Well, the St George's flag, the legacy to that one, in my memory, was when, what's the name, the lady...
Emily Thornberry.
Yes!
Yes! And the white van man. Look at the state of that, I think she said, didn't she?
Yes, and she was pouring disdain and derision on the numbnuts, the knuckle-dragging nature of the England fan, and it was just post-Brexit.
I mean, know your audience, Emily.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the fact that the left has got this hatred of anything patriotic, now it's coming home to roost now, because we are naturally patriotic. As Alex did a fantastic job, didn't she, this morning, at getting all those anecdotes of the reality of realpolitik, of Britishness and Englishness, Scottish, Irish and Welsh, the fact that we fought for something, for these Egypts to be lauding it around, being snowflakey and pathetic. If it weren't for our grandparents who were in the trenches and doing all the stuff like sewing skins onto mosquito wings, then they'd all be either in a concentration camp long gone, or God knows what. I mean, they just don't know what they don't know what they don't deserve it, quite honestly, Dave.
Well, there's another thing also, the disconnect for me with certain politicians and the hypocrisy of sitting there shaking the veterans' hands whilst at the same time taking away from the veterans.
I think one of your colleagues earlier that had this the juxtaposition of the veteran sitting in the shop doorway drunk, and meanwhile all of these illegal criminals walking by be put up in 5-star hotels. That just makes me sick to the... Why did my grandfather fight in the trenches in order to do that? No, I'm sorry. If he knew what this country... He would have just said, well, I want a bloody gone then.
Well, actually, there's a brilliant article in the Telegraph. I'm glad you brought it up. But one Dunkirk-based trafficker basically was telling illegal migrants who are paying money to come across to this country, he said, the police will find you before you reach the shore. They take you to a hotel and you get everything. The government pays you, they feed you, they give you a good home, you get work easily, and they all come here and then they work for loads of companies, which I shouldn't mention, but delivery companies, shall we say, for fast food.
Companies, yeah. Yes, exactly. There's some sort of, what with the American candy shops, the Turkish barbers, the nail, there's some sort of cartel operation it's in the black economy and it's going on all around.
Well, it's money laundering, isn't it?
Shoving it to everyone, all of our high streets now, and they're expecting us to sit there and go, oh, it's lovely, we love multiculturalism. Pathetic, isn't it?
But do you think we've reached a tipping point now where actually I get the sense that I'm starting to hear young people saying enough is enough, and actually that's quite something, and particularly like Nathan Robbins, who was on earlier, who is so passionate about the future of this country, and I'm seeing it across the country when I travel and do political events. Is the tide turning?
I think it very much is, and I think our warning, the elder, was Brexit. That was our shot across the bows to the Uniparty and the deep state and the blob. Was that, listen, we're doing this by the ballot box, and we've had to do it again. We gave Boris and the fake Tory party had a free pass when Nigel and you guys stepped aside to let them get in, because they kind of half promised that they were going to deliver us that Brexit, which they never did. They reneged on that. We've got a bunch of quislings all around us, David, a whole bunch of them, and it makes me sick.
Yeah. Tarquin, so good to talk to you. Thank you very much for calling in this afternoon. Chris is on the line from Epsom. Good afternoon.
Hey, afternoon, David. We've spoken often.
We have, Chris. Yes, how are you?
I'm all right. I'm at home. I can't be at VE Day because I'm looking after my mum, as you know.
Oh, well done. Well done, you.
I don't want to rant today, but I'm going to just say something. I live in a road that was all English when my parents bought this house in 71.
Yep.
We now have Iraqis, Iranians, Bangladeshi, Indian, and South Africans, and my next door neighbours are Portuguese, and all of them are lovely. And this road works really well. We're all friends. We have barbecues together. I had Quisitas with the Portuguese family next door, About 14 of them. It was brilliant. We've got an immigrant hotel 500 metres away. Since they put them in there, our houses have been burgled. They've attempted. They've broken into the cars. It's a nightmare. Well, I'm not against controlled immigration, because it's worked in this street.
Yep.
But the mass immigration is a total nonsense. Right, now I want to tell you about my family and why I'm patriotic.
Yeah, just on that note, though, does the Prime Minister keep saying, I get it? Does he get it?
He doesn't get it. He hasn't got a bloody clue. He won't dare. Why do you think he didn't visit Runcorn?
Yeah, he didn't go once.
Simple reason, he was going to get it in the neck from everybody. Yeah, everybody from left, right and centre. Now, nobody is really supporting him. Nobody.
Yeah, I mean, your point, and actually that illustration is really a good one, which is actually immigration, when it's done properly, is a good thing. This country has always thrived on immigration. It's the lack of fairness. I keep using this word. That's what people say to me. It's the lack of fairness. When people come here illegally and they get put up in a nice hotel and get given 3 meals a day, compared with those people who are struggling, can't pay their bills and get the winter fuel allowance taken off them.
Yeah, don't cut me off before I tell you about my family, because it's really important.
Come on, then.
I've sent you a picture. I fly the Union Jack outside my house.
So do I.
On 25-foot flagpole.
Good for you.
I do change it for the St George flag on St George's Day, and I put a Christmas flag up for Jesus Christmas. And all my neighbours, including all the ones I just mentioned, they all love the fact that I fly it.
Yeah.
They all love it. I'm waiting for the council to come round and say something, because I've got a few words for them, but they haven't, because I'm in an SDP council.
Right.
Right. My grandmother, Annie Barr, she had 2 children. Rose, my mum, Gwen, my aunt. Unfortunately, her husband, George Barr, died during the Second World War. She was bombed out of our home 5 times during the war. After the war, there was no social services. She worked 3 jobs and got up at 4 o'clock in the morning and scrubbed steps as well to put bread on the table and to put a roof over their heads. My godfather, Samuel Bowes, served in Africa in the long-range desert patrol, the Desert Rats, and then was one of the original SAS.
Wow.
He never spoke about it much. But he was as bald as a coot, bald as a billiard ball, and he put that down to the fact that they had terrible trouble with nicks, so they used to wash their hair with diesel, and he reckoned that's what did his hair in.
Right, yes, probably. Won't help.
Wash it in diesel. My godfather and uncle, Ronald Grant, he served in the Navy. He told us he served in the, not the Royal Navy, the other Navy, the...
Merchant Navy?
The Merchant Navy. He died a few years ago, and I found his paperwork. He served in the Royal Navy. He was sunk 3 times and survived.
Right.
But he never wanted to talk about it, so he never admitted he was in the Royal Navy.
Sure.
So I've got his paperwork and I've got his medals. My grandfather, my other grandfather, my grandmother remarried. He'd been a bit of a naughty boy at private school, got slung out twice, and his father was the head of the British Army at the time. This is before this was between the Great War, the 2 wars.
Right.
So he got fed up with him. He was an embarrassment. So he took him to France, and he left him in Paris.
Right.
With a bunch of money and told him to come home when he got an education. He learnt French. He became the first ever foreign taxi operator in Paris, spoke fluent French, and when the Second World War came up, he went to work for MI5 because he could pass as a Frenchman.
Wow.
So my whole family...
So service runs through the family.
I served as well.
Yeah.
I didn't go to what would be called a war. But what I see now, I mean, I talk to... I'm 64. I talk to young kids. I've got a couple of bright, shiny motorbikes, which invariably I'm working on them out the front of the house. And all the mums walk past with their kids as a school at the end of the road.
Yep.
And I talk to everybody. I do the house up at Halloween for the kids. And I talk to them, and they got no idea. They're not taught about the war.
No, I
They're
know.
not taught about what people put up with.
I agree, and sort of this underpins the idea that actually I think Zia Youssef is right, which is we do need to teach children about what has happened, British history, good and bad, but also to be patriotic for this country. Always good to talk to you, Chris. Sorry to cut you off. Chris in Epsom there. We'll go to a break. After the break, obviously it's VE Day that we are celebrating, commemorating today. I'm going to be joined by Alicia Fitzgerald. She's live at Buckingham Palace. We'll cross over to her after this break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, David Bull here for Ian Collins. It's just after 2:30. Whose side is the EU on when it comes to illegal migration? They've basically ruled they're not going to share any of their data on illegal migrants with the United Kingdom. Oh, no, you can't have it, because you're not in Schengen and you're nothing to do with the EU. That seems pretty spiteful to me and also very dangerous when we have real problems with terrorism, as we have seen in the last few days. Today is, of course, VE Day, the 80th commemoration of VE Day. Our correspondent, Alicia Fitzgerald, is down outside Buckingham Palace. I think she's on the Mall, actually. Good afternoon, Alicia.
Good afternoon, David.
So just set the scene for us, because we saw the crowds gathering. It is an historic event. You know, as someone who was there as an observer and also as a political commentator, what was your takeaway from it?
Yeah, so obviously this all began at about 11:45. Even though the crowds were gathering much earlier than that, lots of people really keen to secure a spot right at the front so they could get the best view of the parade and of the royal family when they came. But it started at 11:45. At 12 there was a short read-through of Winston Churchill's famous Downing Street speech declaring victory over Nazi Germany. The parade and the procession then made their way down the Mall and all the way to Buckingham Palace, which is where I'm now stood, waiting effectively, firstly, for the royal family to appear on that famous Buckingham Palace balcony and to wave to the crowd and to salute the procession. And then, of course, that really impressive fly past that we had, all sorts of fighter jets overhead, finishing up with the red arrows, trailing with their red, white and blue coloured steam at the end. So really a really good atmosphere here. A little bit of rain just after the fly past as well, but it didn't seem to deter anyone, and they managed to just miss it.
Well, I know that you spoke to lots of people who were down there as well. Let's just pause and have a listen to some of the comments that we heard earlier on.
And my parents fought in the Second World War, and it's just a kind of remembrance, really. Keep it up here.
Hello, hello.
You're very much dressed for the occasion.
Oh, obviously, I love my country. I love what they've done for us and the allies as well with us. All the Asians, all the Africans, everything. Do you know what I mean? This celebration for everyone, for freedom and peace. That's what it is, do you know what I mean? And let's hope we get some peace in Ukraine very soon. And all the countries fighting. But it's absolutely brilliant. Come all the way from Birmingham. Still knackered. We had to get up at 6 o'clock to get here, but we still don't get a seat, do we?
I was going to say, you've been here a while and you probably can't even see the parade.
I know, that's what I mean, but it's being here, isn't it, darling? Love it, love it, love it. Thank you very much.
You've got to love a Brummie. Alicia, did you get the sense that actually, I mean, obviously it's a solemn occasion, it's also a celebratory occasion. What did you take away from talking to people who travelled from all across the United Kingdom to take part today?
Yeah, I mean, all across the United Kingdom, but also from overseas as well.
Yes.
There were quite a lot of tourists here. Some here just coincidentally at the same time as the celebration,
wow,
and really keen to kind of check out the pomp and pageantry. I know, great timing. But also some that seemed to have travelled here purposely. So this wasn't just a really important day for the UK, but more internationally as well. And I think the reasons that people came was really, really varied and really interesting. Some, of course, like the first speaker we heard in those interviews, for personal reasons, being related to someone who fought in the war, having lost someone who fought, or having some kind of family or friend tie there. But others just really just for that feeling of Britishness and for here for the ceremony, or even to glimpse the royal family. So all sorts of reasons. And there was even a woman who we spoke to who was here talking a lot about Ukraine, and she said it was important that even though this was a previous conflict, important that we kind of apply the same level of respect, and hopefully that we'll be celebrating about a Ukraine victory soon as well. So all sorts.
Alicia, fantastic. Thanks ever so much. Alicia Fitzgerald there outside Buckingham Palace. Let's now cross to Peter Caddick-Adams, who is a military historian. And Peter, thanks ever so much for joining us. I was really keen that we spoke to an historian because can you just set the scene why today is just so important? Also, generations like mine don't remember the war at all. My parents do or did. My grandparents certainly did. And the worry is that young people aren't being taught enough about British history. Why is history important? Are you there, Peter?
Yes, I'm so sorry. It's hugely important because we have no knowledge of the future. And without looking, and the only way we can understand what's about to happen and make sense of the present is to look back at the past. And so that's what this is all about. I think in 1945, Churchill was talking about VE Day being a day of rejoicing. In other words, drawing a line under the awful struggle that a whole generation had been through. But today we're looking at it in a completely different way, which is commemorating an achievement of a whole generation. But again, we don't know what's around the corner. And, the world is a very, very troubled place, far more so than it was even 5 years ago. And all we can do is look back at what we achieved 80 years ago in terms of coalitions and alliances and the nation coming together. And those are the sort of lessons I think that we need for today. And that's why it's wholesome, it's relevant, it's valuable to have a look at VE Day and just dust it off for all the generations who just don't know about it.
I think it has enormous poignancy, but also for me, it is solemn. It also acts as a warning as to what might happen in the future. As you say, we are facing a very unstable world at the moment. The fact is that actually, I think war has never been closer in my lifetime than it was back some decades ago. Does this bring the nation back together, a celebration like this?
I think that's one of the implicit underlying hopes, that we will focus our attention in a way that we haven't done for generations. I'm not sure that we are clued up as a nation as to just how dangerous and tinder paper like parts of Eastern Europe and Southeast Europe are at the moment, and other parts of the world. this is more dangerous than I have ever remembered in my lifetime. But it's a great way of actually, reinvigorating and pumping new life into the debate about defence. What do we have the armed forces for? What do we want them to do? And therefore, what size do we want them to be? And that's all incredibly relevant. And these are debates that it would have been impossible to think that any government would have been having 5 years ago.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it also underpins the percentage we spend of GDP on defence. Also, the role of organisations like NATO, for example.
Yeah, so I'm someone who believes that we should be spending 5% on defence. I'm not sure where you get the money from, but what we have at the moment is inadequate. I was really worried when this government were proposing to cut all the military cadets around the country. Those from 14 and 15 who wear uniform and do useful things on weekday evenings. And I think that was that is a very cheap way of reinvigorating interest and responsibility in a whole new generation. And NATO is incredibly important, but we have got to work out with our European colleagues exactly where it's going. And of course, the one thing that America always said was, don't ever ignore us and try and do something with Europe on your own, because that will displease us enormously. And now that's exactly what America is asking us to do. So we are caught between two different places, power blocks, as it were, as the United Kingdom. And that puts us in a very, very difficult situation, which we should have seen coming, but we haven't.
Do you think politicians learn lessons from history?
No, they don't. Their lessons are last for as long as the next general election is, however far into the future that is, but no longer than 5 years. And rarely do you get a politician who comes into government with a history degree or an arts degree. And ironically, probably the best equipped mentally never went to university at all. That was Winston Churchill, but he had some enormous sense of global reach. His early soldiering and journalism was the equivalent of a degree in global security or a master's in international defense and security, something like that. And it's difficult to find other players on the world stage, or certainly in the United Kingdom, who come with that sort of understanding of the international scene.
In terms of where we go from here and what we've learned and the lessons and history and why it's important, which you have outlined, Zia Youssef, and I don't want you to be overtly political about this, but Zia Youssef has said it's time that we actually give back young people a sense of national pride. I think we've talked down the country far too much over the last few years. And would you agree, therefore, that actually what we need to talk about is what this country has achieved, its greatness, its mistakes, but only by talking about it frankly and actually incorporating history can we learn from that?
Yeah, I mean, this point I made about sort of, breathing new life into the cadet movement and all the rest that go with that, the Boy Scouts and, the voluntary organisations that really came to the fore in the last century that have been limping along a bit, right down to the sort of the Women's Royal Voluntary Service. I mean, we lose that at our peril. And they need far more respect and encouragement. And I would love to see a fair proportion of every school being encouraged to sort of undertake some kind of meaningful social sort of responsibility like that. So they're using their time well and they're growing up with skills that adults are imparting to them. And the cost to the taxpayer will be minimal, but you then get people cemented into a society which they've got skin in the game. They want to protect rather than sort of loafing around in the evenings. That is incredibly important, and that's a very, very cheap return for the money. Defence in a wider sense is far more expensive. But the main thing is we should be having this debate, and that's why I'm pleased you're asking me these questions, and I'm pleased that in this week of VE Day celebrations, the discussion has already gone much wider than simply slapping each other on the back and saying, "Didn't we do so well 80 years ago?"
Really good to talk to you. Thanks ever so much for your time. Peter Caddick-Adams there, who's a military historian. Lots of you getting in touch. Hi, David. This is Brad in Cambridge. Hi, Brad. Good to talk to you, one of our regulars. It's great that Talk is doing all this for VE Day. A lot of my family fought in Europe, but I also hope you will do the same on VJ Day, as well as my father fought in Burma. The war didn't end for them on May the 8th. It's a brilliant point. Thanks very much, Brad. I will endeavour that if I'm on duty, I will do and mark VJ Day as well. Other messages coming in as well. Didn't Starmer feel ashamed of himself shaking hands with veterans and pensioners after refusing them the winter fuel allowance? Lots of you saying exactly the same thing. This is very sad. This country is not worth fighting for. This is Terry. I'm 66. I'm still waiting for decent social housing, which I'll have to pay for. 1.2 million people, by the way, waiting for housing. 1.2 million, and the government has a plan to build 1.5 million homes over 5 years. So, and then on top of that, you've got all the migration issues on top of that. So the numbers just simply do not stack up. Dr. David, this is Max in Bristol. We should be calling the illegal immigrants invaders, because that's what they are. On VE Day, we should realise that that is exactly what they are. The British people are not only paying for them, but we are being protected. That's Max in Bristol. Why should the EU share security data on migrants when Starmer wants freedom of movement? Of course, this is fascinating. The fact is that Keir Starmer is hoping to have a reset with the European Union when it comes to a number of things, including freedom of movement for young people and sharing of intelligence information. This is not going to go down well with Keir Starmer, I can tell you that. And of course, I know from my own experience in the European Parliament, the EU, and the question I'm asking today is, whose side is the EU actually on? The answer to that question is the EU side. This is Talk.
What was that, Mike? What was that?
Oh, my God. Well,
does this man have anyone protecting him in the media space? I mean, where's your publicist that steps in and says, we promised you 10 minutes, it's been...
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Back just before 3 o'clock, Monday, May the 5th. Let's take some calls now. Martin's on the line from Cambridge. Good afternoon, Martin.
Hello, David. Hopefully, our best health minister we'll ever have.
Ah, bless you. I'm not there yet, but, you know, let's wait and see.
No, basically the reason I'm ringing up, and obviously the soldiers were very brave, but my grandparents, I'm from North Derbyshire, one was a train driver, the other one was a miner. And my first granddad, who was a train driver, used to take ammunition from Sheffield through to Lincoln. On one occasion, he noticed that the sound had changed in the locomotive, and he slammed the brakes on, and there was a massive bomb explosion on the railway line. And he had like 5,000 tons of high explosive, you know, and and he stopped the train, and so he used to go from Sheffield to Lincoln, but then the next day he'd put his pants on and do it again.
Big boy pants, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And my other granddad was a miner, and he was the most intelligent person I've ever met, and he set up reading rooms in mining communities, and he used to do equations and do mathematical equations, send them to Cambridge University for the students to work them out. And he was a miner, and he was doing 12-hour shifts on his stomach. Anyway, he nearly got killed in a rock fall. And one thing, my gran was a nurse at King's Mill, so she looked after all the troops that were coming back and all the rest of it. And they got nothing, David. No. They got absolutely nothing. So what my point of the conversation is that people who call reform far right simply do not understand that the reform at the moment are actually almost old Labour, country, community, family, and the people in these communities are conservative. Socially conservative, but economically to the left. And the mainstream media, the people simply do not understand what these people are. And it still goes from, like I say, what I talked about in my family. And then that ethos is still there. They hate people who are on the benefits. I mean, that's why old people won't claim benefits. It's the biggest insult in the world for them to fill a form in to get their heat in. You know, they would never do it. My parents who are 92 now would never do it.
No. I mean, and that's the same generation that doesn't go to the NHS because they don't want to bother it, even though they're paying the money for it.
Absolutely. They don't want to see themselves as a burden. And these communities are so proud, and that's why they're not xenophobic, but they're very cautious of outsiders. And
so that's so interesting. That's the bit that the Labour Party just simply doesn't understand. It does not understand why reform is doing so well. And it keeps painting reform as being far right, and by doing that, they're alienating their own core traditional voters even more.
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to, I mean, I was born around Mansfield, Bolzo, Denny Skinner country, and if you go around those areas, Lee Anderson territory, and then Lee will tell you, these people are proud people.
Yeah, I know.
And they hate scroungers. And so my grand blesser, who was, like I say, the nurse, we were talking about there was a murder or whatever. Do you know what I'd do? I'd shoot him. And that was a nurse, right? But they don't suffer fools gladly.
No.
And what my point is, David, is that the intelligentsia have totally misunderstood anybody north of Watford. They simply do not understand. And it all stems back to, like I say, working class people doing their bit during the war. And that ethos is still there. You know, the people are still, and they hate the way that their towns and communities are just being hollowed out, you know, and they want their industries back.
But there's something really fascinating here. The intelligentsia here in London, many of my friends who are very academic, who sit in great bastions and universities and all the rest of it, cannot understand what I am trying to get through their stupid heads.
No, they can't, because they've been taken over by Guardian readers.
Yeah. Well, they are Guardian readers.
They're Guardian readers, and so the reform aren't right wing. They are centrist slightly to the left. Because if you take into account conservatives, so you know, the society-wise conservatism, that is what these people are. They like Britain how it used to be. They want you know, the towns square to be nice, and they want the shops open, and that's what they want. And can I just say one thing on the health thing? Just an idea. What people ought to do is give companies, if part of a package for people, is to have private insurance as part of their salary or their contract, because then that would boost private healthcare and take off the NHS. But we need to do these things. People are proud people, you know, and we're fed up of being talked down to.
I couldn't agree more. What a brilliant call, Martin. Thanks ever so much for that. Martin in Cambridge there, talking about people of Britain being incredibly proud and how spot on and accurate he is. We'll take a break. After the break, I'm going to be talking to Major General Chip Chapman, who's ex-head of counter-terrorism at the MOD, about this terror attack that has been thwarted on British soil. Don't go anywhere. This is Talk. Good afternoon.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino?
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Showbiz years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson had been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. Just after 3 o'clock on Monday, May the 5th. I'm David Bull, in for Ian Collins. Thanks very much for your company this afternoon. Well, coming up this hour, VE Day celebrations continue around the United Kingdom as the country marks the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War in Europe. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage is threatening legal action to block asylum seekers being housed in areas controlled by Reform UK. The party is pushing to shut down migrant hotels within 100 days following its election victory in 10 local councils. And a suspected Iranian terror plot was just hours from execution when 5 men, including 4 Iranians, were arrested in a major UK counter-terror operations. Do get in touch this afternoon, please. The number 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can also text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X as well at talkTV. Well, a very good afternoon to you. Thanks very much for your company this afternoon. We've been watching these incredible VE Day celebrations, commemorations here in London, of course, and of course around the country as well, and the Commonwealth too. Thank you so much for all your messages coming in about VE Day. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. Also, I want to talk about this terror plot that has been thwarted. And joining me now, Major General Chip Chapman, who's ex-head of counter-terrorism at the MOD. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, David.
Just before we get on to this terrorism plot, should we just talk a little about VE Day and what it means for you personally?
Well, I think the most interesting thing for me was I was talking to Dolly Vines, a 94-year-old lady, a couple of days ago, and asking her, she was from Camberwell, and what VE Day meant to her, really. Yeah. And it was two characteristics that she said. The first one was joy, but the second one was relief, because she wouldn't hear a doodlebug anymore. And, of course, this was the first total war. It involved everyone, civilians, children, those who you might think of as non-combatants were involved in this. And my grandmother was killed by a German bomb in the Plymouth Blitz in 1941. My grandfather, her husband, was also killed indirectly by a German bomb when he died of inhaling the sort of dust from being in bed. That it wasn't the bomb that killed him, it was a dust because he had pneumonia at the time. So my father was left an orphan by the war. So it was a total war. So it's joy and relief. And you see that joy today by everyone in London. But it was relief for a number of people as well.
Of course, and actually it's so important. I mean, obviously my generation, we didn't experience that war, but my parents' generation did, my grandparents' generation did. And then those younger people, and there are many generations below me, let me tell you, I'm not sure they've got a very strong grip on what happened, why the war was important, what we achieved by that war, why Britain is a great country, and why it's worth fighting for.
Well, I think partly that is to do with how people measure and benchmark time. People of my age, and I'm older than you, David, look at various things. So, for example, I'm going this week to talk about at a school about the Falklands War. It's 43 years from the Falklands War. I was born 43 years after the Battle of the Somme, which the school had a VC winner for. So if you're very young, you don't benchmark time in the same way that you and I would benchmark time. We've all got these different variables to do with that. So I think as they get older, hopefully they'll get schooled in the way of these things. But of course, it's correct that they should be schooled at school so that they've got a good set of values to take them forward for the future. Being a decent human being is the most thing. So don't indoctrinate people, but give them good values and the conceptual tools to think clearly about subjects and analyse them.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point that Zia Youssef, Reform UK's chairman, has said actually we need to teach children, to be proud to be British. Would you agree?
Well, of course I would, but teach them good values first. To be a good citizen is the basis of good citizenship, and that would be everything else really flows from that, in my opinion.
Very good advice. Let's talk about this imminent terror attack. So a suspected Iranian terror attack was hours from being launched on British soil. This is according to all the national press today. 5 men, including 4 Iranian nationals, were arrested at locations across England. This was on Saturday. The Home Secretary described it as one of the biggest counter-terror operations in recent years. So, according to the intel, allegedly, authorities feared the attack on a specific premises was imminent. Also, in a separate incident, counter-terror police arrested a further 3 Iranian men in London, fearing they would leave the UK or destroy critical evidence against them after the other raids. These people were arrested under powers granted by the National Security Act, which allows officers to make arrests if they reasonably suspect individuals of being involved in foreign power threat activity. We are starting to see a very unstable world. I think you know far more than I do about the number of plots, the chatter that our security services get. Of course, the plots that they foil, we never really hear about. We only really hear about the ones that they are unable to foil. All fingers are pointing at Iran here. What light can you shed on what we know so far?
Well, I think you have to separate 2 things here. So the first one was those who were arrested under counter-terrorism legislation, and that's where you get into this notion of imminency of a threat. Now, I don't think it was as imminent as some of the journalistic people say. It's a bit of hyperbole. But the thing about intervention from the security services is that they will always intervene if there's a threat to life rather than developing the intelligence. So though they might like to run something longer, if there is a threat to life, they will go in. Now, I suspect that wasn't quite the case because you had 5 people arrested, but they were in 5 different locations. So to get a coherent plot together is very difficult. The other 3 people were, as you said, I think, arrested under the National Security Act. That is really to do with aiding a foreign intelligence service. That is different than counter-terrorist legislation. What is true is that we are in a starkly contested era. The head of MI6 said this in 2021, and there are 4 big priorities: Russia, China, Iran, and international terrorism. The most interesting statistic in the last 2 years is that in the Intelligence and Security Committee report of December 23, 19% of the effort of MI5 went to state actors. This year, it's been 48%. So the rise of the amount of activity done by MI5 and Counter-Terrorist Command against state threats rather than counter-terrorist and Northern Ireland threats has been a significant reversal.
So what conclusions can we draw from that?
Well, what we can conclude from that at the moment is that in this starkly contested world, that there are more malign powers there which are out to do harm to us. Now, that is not harm to the state per se, and the MO of the Iranians has been to try and do assassination plots against Iranian dissidents, journalists, media operatives, Jewish and Israeli individuals. But I think the heartening thing really is that the blowback of those potential assassination plots, and it was state-sponsored assassination which was first mentioned in that Intelligence Security Committee report, is that the blowback is limited by the competence of the security agencies, and MI5 and Counter-Terrorist Command are extremely capable. So I think we can be heartened by that. What is unusual in this case is that of these 8 people that are arrested, 7 are Iranian. And what the Iranians have historically done in the last few years is sort of outsource their involvement to criminal gangs. And indeed, there was a guy who was arrested and charged, convicted in 2023, and he was a Chechen-born Austrian national. So normally you don't necessarily know that you're working for Iranians. So having a direct Iranian involvement is fairly unusual from their normal modus operandi.
And so if it is unusual in terms of the modus operandi, would that point to anything significant, or would it be that they are feeling more emboldened, Iran is feeling more emboldened? Because it tends to work, as you say, it outsources or it works through proxies.
Well, it could be either of those things, of course. So either they've got slack tradecraft and have been caught, or that the competence and the way that we now use, for example, artificial intelligence, particularly after the 2017 attacks, where the operational reviews that went on did use a lot more machine learning and artificial intelligence to get you a start point for these to look at these threats. So all those things could potentially be true. We won't know because that would be secret intelligence, which won't be released in any Intelligence Security Committee report. That would be redacted information.
So there are lots of calls from across the political spectrum for the government to prescribe Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. Lots of political figures. Nigel Farage says he can't believe it hasn't been done in the past. Luke Akehurst, the Labour MP for North Durham, also says clearly Labour needs to prescribe the IRGC. What difference does it make if it is prescribed?
Well, I'm not sure it'd make that much difference at the moment, because one of the things that the National Security Act of 2023, which you referenced earlier, did was that if you are aiding a foreign intelligence service, you could be liable to 14 years imprisonment. That is actually the same number of years that you would get if you were supporting a prescribed organisation. So I'm not sure that the need for legislation is there. One of the things that the government are looking at the moment is that Jonathan Hall, the reviewer of terrorist legislation, is looking at the counter-terrorist legislation to see if there's a gap between looking at individuals who we arrest and prosecute and those of state sponsorship. So if there is a gap, we'll see that being closed in the next few months when he reports on that issue.
So for people listening and watching at home who are concerned about plots unfolding in this country, I mean, I've certainly grown up in a time where we've always had threats to our national security. Can you sort of benchmark it for us, where we are now compared to where we were, say, 10 years ago? Or is it much more dangerous now in the United Kingdom than it was 10 years ago?
Well, you always have to be careful of threat inflation. So there's absolutely no doubt that there's more extremism, and there are more people who are, for example, put to the prevent program, but it is not necessarily a linear progression from being in the prevent program and having an extremist mindset to actually going and carrying out a lethal attack. They're all different functions. So one of the key benchmarks is the threat level, because JTAC, who are independent of MI5 and government, that's the Joint Terrorist Analysis Centre, they benchmark or give you the threat level. The threat level at the moment is substantial. That's level 3 of 5 and has been for some time. If we did think there was a elevated threat, but either from a state or from other entities, including IS, that would go up to severe. And if there was an imminent threat, it would be critical. And that's why we'd have to be slightly careful about whether this was an imminent threat, because if it wasn't going to be wrapped up, we would have gone to critical. So I'm slightly heartened by that, but that doesn't mean you have to be complacent, rather like sort of the Israelis. There's no such thing as absolute security, and sometimes a ballistic missile from the Houthis can get through.
Really good to talk to you. Thank you ever so much for your time as well this afternoon. Major General Chip Chapman, the ex-head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence. Lots of messages coming in. We were talking about being proud, as Youssef saying that actually we need to instill pride and values into our young people. Betty, good afternoon to you. One of our regulars. Good afternoon, Betty. It's probably changed now, but our secondary school history curriculum in Ireland was excellent. We did full review of all the wars and the empires. Was pretty neutral. I did too, but there again, I'm quite old, so I think the curriculum has changed since then. Hi, David. Great show. Thank you very much, Richard. Just want to message on Keir Starmer. What a fool he is. Does he think the picture of him cozying up to veterans will make the public think he's more electable? He took the OAP's fuel allowance. Good afternoon. This is Barry. I'm a veteran, and no way would I fight again for this king or the government. Gosh, that's sobering. Dr. David, this is David in the Cotswolds. One thing to remember is our grandparents, the generation that fought, they didn't know they would have to fight before the war started, nor how long they would have to fight for when the time came. And when the time came, they did go and they did fight. But with the woke culture we've now developed, I'm not sure many would go if the call came again. Do you know, that's fascinating. I asked our Future Politics panel, which is a feature I have on my Sunday breakfast show, I asked young people, would you be prepared to fight for this country? Now, some answered me yes unequivocally, and others started to say they wanted to understand the reasoning why why they might be asked to be called up. And I was absolutely gobsmacked by that. The idea that young people might actually question authority, or at least say, right, give me a really good reason why I should go and fight for the country, I thought was extraordinary in many senses. Keep these messages coming in, please. Also, we were talking about immigration as well. Of course, the EU refusing to share information like fingerprint data on illegal immigrants with this country because we're not part of the club, and shows how petty they are, really. Small boats, it's inaccurate, says Ben in Newtown Ards. Small boats is inaccurate. We should call them landing craft. What was the point of winning World War II if we ended up being invaded anyway? Dear Dr. David, I wonder what those wonderful veterans think when they look at this awful country now that was once a country to be proud of, and what they won and so many lost their lives for. Penny, that's Penny in Essex. Thank you for that. And let's do one more. Martin, until we totally change the beliefs and attitudes of our politicians, the degradation of our country will continue. Thank goodness we have hope with reform UK. Keep those messages coming in, please. Lots of questions for you this afternoon. Your thoughts also, your reminiscences, your experiences, what VE Day means to you. Also, the EU, that ruling that they're refusing to share data on illegal migrants because we're not in Schengen. What do you make of that? Whose side is the EU on? Also, anything else that you'd like to talk about this afternoon? 0344 499 1000. I'll take some calls and more messages after this break. This is Talk.
Know that jobs, well-paying jobs, are at stake and that they are being destroyed by the drive towards net zero. And you're, of course, absolutely right. The jobs that are being created, that will be created from net zero, won't be in Britain, they'll be in China, as has happened. We've seen that with solar, with the solar industry. It's a huge Chinese industry now, not a job here from making solar PV panels.
It seems to me, around the world, the lure of trying to be sort of morally self-righteous and go hard and fast for net zero is beginning to wane.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Hi, David. My boyfriend, this is Tanya, is an ex-Marine. He said that he wouldn't serve again as he doesn't recognise the country he originally fought for. It's extremely sad that he feels this way. He's even said if he was called up, by the way, he's 37, he would rather chop his legs off. Emily Thornberry and Sadiq Khan must be hiding behind their sofas today with all these far-right racist union flags flying. No, guess what? Sadiq Khan, I saw him. He was there watching the celebrations today. I hope they're both okay. Fools, says Nick about Emily Thornberry and Sadiq Khan. Hello, David. The EU... Oh, yes, I'm asking, whose side is the EU on when it comes to illegal migration? Because actually, if the EU was serious about this and wanted to help the United Kingdom and Europe and all of us come together, and this is not about being in a political union, this is actually about making sure we have safety and security of our shores, by the way. So I'm asking, whose side is the EU on when it comes to illegal migration? Well, this one from Cliff says, the EU are not our friends. This latest move is purely vindictive because we said no thanks. If we had a leader on the level of Churchill, we would not be trying to cosy up to the EU. Sadly, our Prime Minister is very pro-EU, and will never stand up to the bullies in Brussels. He is not at all like Churchill of WW2, but more like Churchill the dog, rolling over to have his tummy tickled. Oh, yes. It's interesting that, because I have heard some people saying that actually this is a Brexit fail. Well, it's not actually, because the fact is we didn't actually have full access to that data anyway, because we weren't in Schengen. But this latest move by the EU, I think, smacks of jealousy. They want to get some sort of revenge on this country, and I think it's extremely petty and very dangerous as well. Hi, Dr. David Doran in Dover. If the EU will not share any intelligence on illegals or asylum seekers, why don't we just say any intelligence that we have from the Five Eyes we will not share with you? Well, maybe that is the answer. Hi, Dr. David. Angie in Portsmouth. Yes, this country is still worth fighting for. Otherwise, our heroes have died and are still dying for no reason. My teenage daughter, unfortunately, had no idea what VE Day was. Wow. And that tells me the state of our education system. If we can't explain that our heroes are the reason that we have freedom, then it is a sad day. Great show. Angie, thanks very much for that. Good afternoon, David. Labour destroyed this country so badly in the 1970s. I emigrated to Denmark and returned in the 1980s. Believe me, if I was younger, I would do exactly the same now. Reform is my only hope. I'm not cherry-picking these, I'm just reading them out. Just one more about the EU as well. This is David in the Cotswolds. Dr. David, it's very clear to see the EU is solely on the EU side and will definitely not act like a reasonable neighbour when it comes to dealing with the United Kingdom, more like a spiteful one. Despite our efforts to liberate them 80 years ago. Further, if you look at the European coalition of the willing, the individual countries of the EU can't even unite amongst themselves, but they're more than willing to rely on our young men to defend them. We should align with the USA, become Fortress Britain, and send these illegal immigrants from whence they came. The EU, any EU country will do. France, Belgium, Ireland, the Netherlands, it's their problem that has beset the United Kingdom, so they can jolly well have them back. Also, earlier on, I had Nathan Robbins on, who was talking about the impact of living near Wethersfield, where all these asylum seekers are, and the fact that young ladies feel very scared to go out at night. We've even got elderly people too scared to go and walk their dogs at night as well. This one says, I can well believe Nathan's story. My sister lives in a suburb of Birmingham for 20 years, always been a very nice area. She won't even go to the local park now to walk the dog because she says there are too many young men hanging around the park and around the play area. She had two men follow her. Wow, I got her a pepper spray, but she now drives 5 miles to another park for dog walking. Keep all of those messages coming in. We'll take some calls. Andy's on the line from Swansea. Good afternoon, Andy.
Good afternoon, David. You all right?
Yeah, good, thanks. What's on your mind?
A bit of rambling memories of VE Day.
Oh, yeah.
Sort of 25 years ago, we had a party from my gran and my great auntie. And my great uncle. My great uncle had actually been in the Navy. My granddad, who'd passed by that stage, was a logistics rider with the Royal Signals, and my great uncle had been in the tank regiment. They were sort of giving me memories of the war, and then a few years later, me and a few mates went over to Pontefract and Café Gondry and all of Normandy. We also went to all of the cemeteries, including the German one. And I think it's important to remember on this day, I'm extremely proud to be British, but over in the German museum just across the road from La Combe Cemetery, there was a letter that a 17-year-old boy written home to his parents to say, don't worry about me, I've been moved from Pas-de-Calais, I'm in a safe area, blah, blah, blah. 3 days later, he was killed in fighting. He had no idea of what was happening. He was a 17-year-old child, for goodness sake, and it doesn't get anywhere. What I'm saying is your brigadier or whatever rank he was on. Major
General.
I think education is the important thing. We never see documentaries on about what happened. We don't have any education of, look, guys, this is terrible if it starts. And that's what's going to get through to the younger generation.
So that's a really interesting point, because when I grew up, of course, we had linear television, so you watched what was on. So there may well have been something that would have educated you about the war or about historical events or whatever. And of course, because kids can now cherry pick what they want to watch and it's all on demand, therefore they don't get that kind of education, do they?
Captain America, who is oblivious to bullets. I mean, you know, they don't get. Hold on a second. If this kicks off, there's just meat and pulp left there, and you can tell whether somebody's Canadian, German, British, whatever. And it's a total waste if you get over there. It's heartbreaking to see.
It is heartbreaking.
Cemeteries over there. The British cemetery at Ranville was fantastic. Literally headstones, floral arrangements, and again. Boy, 17 years old, 18-year-old, died 6th of June, 44. Heartbreaking.
Andy, thanks very much for sharing those thoughts. Mark's on the line from Lincolnshire. Good afternoon.
Hi there, David. Good afternoon. Yeah, it was just regarding the interview you had there with Henry Bolton, really, SDP. Yeah, he's quite right in what he was saying.
Which bit about just having zero tolerance for illegal migrants coming to this country, rapid processing, getting them out of the UK. He also mentioned that he shared the view from Reform, but he said Reform lacked detail, I think was what he said.
Yeah, which is my opinion as well. That is how I feel on it. Nigel is very good. You see, a lot of people always seem to conflate, Nigel Farage with Donald Trump and, he's our Trump and all this. The difference is that I see between the two characters, they're both really good at the headlines, both really good at getting themselves out there and getting popular. The only difference is, for the few years before the American election, Trump wasn't just talking about what the headline stuff. He was giving some details of what he meant to do, what he was going to do to fix the problems. Nigel doesn't do that. And that concerns me a lot.
Well, I'm not sure that's entirely true. I mean, I obviously know far more than I should about what's going on, but obviously there's a policy unit working up those policies. He has mentioned the Minister for Deportations, for example. Also, I think it's worth bearing in mind, of course, we have 4 long years until a general election.
Well, yes, absolutely we do. But the question is, though, David, is he going to, for example, double, triple border force? Because that's what you're going to have to do. Because the problem is, the issue that we've got, and this is one of the major issues that I've always had with Reform, it's why I joined UKIP at the end of the day, because I much prefer their stance on it. They have a plan that's ready to go. It's there. Some people might not like it. I do. And that is the case that, at the end of the day, we have millions of people in this country. Everything that Nigel talks about is in reference to when he takes office, if Reform take office. What about no doubt, who knows how many more are going to be added to the already millions that are here anyway, between now and, 4 years' time under this Labour government. And particularly now, when you actually consider, it was a great result for Reform last week, taking control of, 6, 7 councils
10.
or something? 10. And the problem that I see with that is, and we all know this will happen, Labour will go all out to push as many immigrants into those councils as they possibly can. So in other words, they're going to increase even more the amount that they're going to let into the country. So, like I say, my main issue is because Nigel just is not talking about what he's going to do about the problem that already exists and that will exist by the time Reform could take office.
Are you not persuaded by the idea that the boats are turned back immediately? There's offshore processing, there's a Minister for Deportations. I mean, that seems pretty aggressive compared with the current stance. Also declare a national emergency, and you can do that under UN Convention of the Seas 1951.
Yeah, absolutely, David. There's absolutely nothing wrong with his plan of what he wants to do when he comes into office. The problem and the concern that I have is that the country's already crippled now.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. And unless you're going to tackle that problem, which Nigel has said several times he is not willing to do, he doesn't think it's politically possible, etc., etc.
But of course, Reform is not in government.
Well, they're not. But he's not talking about will he do anything about it. And he can't win the trust of somebody like myself if he's not willing to talk about it, because especially when every interview he gives, where he's asked that question, which is very rare anyway, his answer is he doesn't think he can do it. He doesn't want to do it.
Do what? Sorry, I'm confused. Do what?
Do what? To mass deport people that should not be here already.
Well, I think you've made a mistake there, because it was very clear in the run-up to the local elections, and this was in the election literature, that everyone who's here illegally will be deported.
Right. I'm not entirely convinced by that, because it's very suspicious, isn't it, David, that this comes out, he says nothing, he gives completely contradictory interviews prior to this last election. All of a sudden he's saying all the right things again. My point is, David, if you can see where I'm coming from...
Yeah, I can, absolutely.
You know, he 1 minute it's one thing, the next minute it's another thing, and then, you know, in 6 months' time it'll be something totally different. That's my fear with Nigel Farage. You know, I've always liked the guy. He's always talked a good game, but he always seems to... I don't know what it is with the guy. For me, he seems almost afraid of the hard left. He seems afraid of being called racist, of being called far right. You know, and the problem is, it's like the Tories. You know, everybody knows the Tories tried to pander and became, let's face it, centre-left in an effort to out-woke Labour, and it was never going to work, because the people that are voting Labour, in other words, the left wing, they're never going to vote Tory. They're never going to vote Reform. So you might as well, as far as I'm concerned, you might as well face that head on, because the reality is the vast majority of people out there, you know, Labour's vote base is probably 20 to 25% of the country at the end of the day, and we know this from the last general election, because everybody that was voting Labour came out and voted Labour to get rid of the Tories. That's an absolute guarantee. So you kind of already know what their vote share is, which is why all Reform really have to do is start polling, you know, 30%, around 30%, and they can take the whole election in 2029. As far as
I mean, also, just to counter that, if you look back, Reform was at 6%, it's now polling way into the 30s, so that is an incredible meteoric rise, but I take the point, absolutely. And it's worth remembering, of course, that the party is more than Nigel Farage, and he now has another MP to add to that list. We could talk all day, Mark. Thanks very much for your call. We have to take a break then, otherwise I'll be in terrible trouble. After the break, I'm going to be talking about our connected homes and Alexa and all the rest of it. Guess what? People are starting to wise up to the fact that Alexa may always be listening to our conversations. We'll talk about that after this break.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talk 3:37. David Bull here for Ian Collins. Keep your messages coming in. I was talking about illegal migrants earlier. This is extraordinary. This is in the Telegraph. And essentially, it's talking about how they are marketing themselves, the people traffickers, to get people over to this country. So one Dunkirk-based trafficker insisted that work was far more plentiful in the UK than in France. This man was charged £1,370 for a place on a rigid-hulled inflatable boat. Now, wait for this. So the people trafficker said, oh, it's easy. The police will find you before you get to the shore. They then take you to a hotel and you get everything. Yes, the government pays you, they feed you, they give you a good home. They won't leave you on the street, not like in France. Then you can find work really easily. There are lots of easy jobs you can do while staying in hotels. All you need to do to get a job is you need a phone and bike to make good money. Life in England is good. And of course, these asylum seekers are paying off the people smugglers by illegally working as bike couriers for fast food and grocery delivery companies. I nearly fell over. They're making up to 500 quid a week working for services like Deliveroo, Just Eat and Uber Eats. Now, I want to know why on earth this hasn't been stamped out. Martin says, hi, David, time to actually smash the gang, starting with Deliveroo and Just Eat. Keep those messages coming in. I mean, that's absolutely shocking. By the way, my mum's been on the phone telling me that her parents were bombed out 3 times, and apparently it was too dangerous for my grandmother and my mother to be in London because that's where they lived at that time. So they were sent to Manchester to be with family. Now, the minute they arrived in Manchester, that was when Manchester was then bombed. Thanks. Good afternoon, Mum. Hope you're well. Right, let's talk about Alexa, because actually there's a great segue here, because Mum's now got an Alexa and she's always saying to me it's listening because I'm getting adverts and they're being tailored to what I happen to mention. And actually there's quite a rude story where she was talking to one of her friends about something and Alexa misunderstood and sent her adverts for something rather saucy as a result. And well, this is the interesting story. Britons are buying radios because they're afraid that Alexa is spying on them. This is according to the boss of Roberts Radios. Now, I don't know if you know what a Roberts radio is, but it looks like a very old-fashioned traditional radio. Owen Waters, who's the chief executive of the Surrey-headquartered company, said Roberts has seen an increase in the sales of their radios, and this is because people are concerned about smart speakers, because people think that Alexa is constantly listening. Now, why do we think that? Well, if you are sitting there at dinner and you're having a conversation, I don't know, about whatever, a holiday in Cyprus, suddenly you get tons of adverts for holidays in Cyprus popping up. And so if Alexa is there 24/7, then she is clearly listening. Now, the company says she is not listening. The company says, no, you have to wake her up by saying, hey, Alexa. And all of the manufacturers are saying they are not listening in on you. Neither are any of the other smart devices. But people don't believe these companies and they're turning to Roberts Radios. Well, joining me now is Rob Lyons, Science and Technology Director at the Academy of Ideas. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Is she listening?
I don't think she is. I think
is.
That there's a lot. I think that we give up so much information to every time we do a web search, every time we post on social media, and all of that, that they kind of don't need it. And also, as soon as you say, Alexa,
yes,
then it's listening, and then anything that's going on, it's picking up. So you know, and what's useful from Alexa's point of view is if you've asked to wake her up, to ask for something, that says something very important about the kinds of things that you like. So therefore, it's more useful to them to wait for you to do the wake up word. And then send you adverts based on that.
You see, I use my Alexa for lots of things, but shopping lists, particularly, you know, food shopping.
Yeah. Well, exactly. So you said, Alexa, make a shopping list up. I want X, Y, Z. Sausages. And then you might get the odd sausage advert because you've woken her up and now she's listening.
Yes.
I think that the way that we sort of give out our information to our devices and to the browsers is obviously a social problem for the world we're in at the moment. Is that we talk about privacy a lot, and we want to talk about Alexa not listening when we don't want it to listen, but actually, in the rest of the time, we're just giving up our private information left, right, and centre.
Well, you're right. And of course, not only that, we then tell everyone in the whole world what we're doing, who we're with, the names of these people, what we're wearing. We're holding this product, which we happen to like, or whatever. Look at my new watch. You know, this is where I live.
Yeah.
Here's the sign behind me. Come and burgle me. I mean, it is amazing how much we give away.
Absolutely, yeah. And, very personal stuff. I mean, not just... what we're buying or whatever, but what state we're on in life. Start Googling for divorce lawyers, and you're going to get adverts for divorce lawyers coming through, or funeral plans.
Yes.
If you say that you search for the right particular things. So we do that, and we do have to maybe be a bit more conscious about how much we're giving up. But at the same time, all these services are so useful to us that we just kind of go along with it and, exchange a bit of privacy for convenience.
I mean, it's very funny. I'm starting to get a lot of sort of Saga magazine's life insurance and dementia support. Says a lot about me.
Yes, it does. Well, we're at a certain age, David. We are.
Well, that's very true. I mean, it's very depressing, actually, because I used to get some fun things through the post.
Yes, well, the fun stopped now. It's all downhill.
So let's just talk about this. The technology is moving so fast. I'm a technophile. I love technology. However, that being said, I just can't keep up with some of the tech. And when I give it to my nephews and nieces, who are, all sorts of ages, they think I'm really stupid because I don't know how to use some of these things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly somebody who I order something and I'm getting it out of the box, I'm playing with it straight away, and I'm a bit of a gadget head when it comes to that kind of thing. But then some of the services, TikTok, couldn't care less.
No,
Instagram, couldn't care less. X, I'm on it all the time. But,
yes, but no, so you've made a fundamental mistake. That's not the right thing. So apparently if you're cool, you're on Insta.
All right. Well, I'm so uncool. It's not true. I'm a blast furnace. I'm so uncool.
Yeah. Well, I know the feeling. And also TikTok, this is what all the kids love.
Yeah, exactly. And I just couldn't care less about it at all. I mean, for my wife's an artist, and for her work, she has to do to promote herself on social media, and she's doing reels and putting music to things and whatever. And I go, good luck. And I'm the techie.
And so we're seeing shifts, aren't we, in terms of those social media platforms? Also, the concern is actually young people are living their lives sort of on social media and not actually living their lives in actual present and where they are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's one thing. To be honest, I think all of us are a bit guilty of that. We go out, meet some friends, and then we're all on our phones. Not necessarily interacting as much as we should. So we need to have a phone ban at the table for adults as well as for
Well, I would agree with that. And actually, I've got friends. If you go to a dinner party, you have to check in your phone at the front door, and you get it when you leave.
Yes, very good.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we need to. And what? Sorry.
And engage.
Also, so what do you think is driving then? If it's not that Alexa is listening, why are Robert's radios, which essentially is a radio, that's all it does, doesn't do anything else. It doesn't hoover the carpet, doesn't do anything else. It's a radio. Why are their sales rising? They've been through a very difficult patch, but they are seeing increasing sales.
I mean, obviously, if people believe that these smart speakers are listening to them, then of course it doesn't matter whether they are or not. It'll push them towards something that isn't listening. But actually, there is something to be said for good old-fashioned radio. And the fact that you can have this little box and you don't need an internet connection, you don't need any hassle with it, you can tune into your favourite station, and if you're the kind of person who's doing something else and just likes to have it on in the background, like with talk or anything else, then it's great. It's just simple and it's very straightforward.
I mean, it's fascinating you say that. When I had some work done on my house, of course, you get the builders coming in and what they've got is a radio, and they listen to old-fashioned radio. In fact, they tend to listen to talk, I'm very pleased to say. But also, just in terms... I've forgotten my train of thought, but just in terms of the way that technology is changing, have we reached a sort of tipping point here, or do you see... I mean, certainly when I presented Tomorrow's World, which was about 100 years ago, I could show you a computer. This is what a computer looks like. Now, of course, everything has become so small that, and I think that was the demise of Tomorrow's World, which was that it was no longer visual enough for television. And we are now seeing the speed of progress for technology at such a vast rate that it's impossible to visualise what is going on. Where are we, do you think, in the development of tech?
Well, the big thing now is AI, and almost every website, every service you've got has got an AI sort of attachments to it now. So I've noticed on WhatsApp now there's a little floaty button thing where you can get Meta AI to do things for you, to write messages and all sorts of things. They've just bolted it onto everything, and it's, you know, occasionally it is useful, but a lot of the time it isn't useful. So that, I think that at the moment, working out how and to what extent we use AI in all these services, I think is the big issue at the moment.
And of course, plagiarism is a huge problem for teachers, for university lecturers as well.
Oh yeah, and the problem is the AI isn't that brilliant. So it does make mistakes. Even when you ask it quite simple things, sometimes it makes some pretty big howlers. So from the point of view of a student, if you went to university or to college to learn something, I would avoid using AI a great deal, because I think you could get caught out by the inaccuracies. And anyway, you're supposed to be developing your brain.
Well, quite. And it's meant to be your own original thought and your own original writing. Really good to talk to you, Rob. Rob Lyons there, Science and Technology Director at the Academy of Ideas. Lots of messages. Sue, one of our regulars, the EU is on the side of the EU. They want us to beg to give them everything we have of value. They want our fishing waters, which they pollute, and they want to dump illegal immigrants on us, which is killing our society and economy. And luckily, we've all voted for Keir Starmer, who's going to do just that and give the EU whatever they want. Hi, David, from a Reform supporter. I feel the EU has never forgiven the UK for leaving the EU. I agree. And clearly sees there's a serious issue with migration and its effects due to differing cultures. In my opinion, they see us as a dustbin for their economic and criminal migration. And why wouldn't they, with how our government treats them? You're awesome, in capital letters. Of course, I'm going to read that out. Paul in Salford, thanks very much for that. Fiona in Aberdeenshire. David, nice surprise seeing you today. I think Reform's brilliant results last week will give people the confidence to celebrate Great Britain, rather than feel they had to hide their support under a bushel, which I feel has been the prevalent feeling due to the loud left and SNP rhetoric. Fiona, thanks very much for that. Right, let's just see. David, clearly the EU are not our friends. If they took back illegal immigrants, then the mass migration across Europe has a chance of ceasing. Being in bed with the EU is annoying. I now have lost it. Being in bed with the EU is annoying the US. Starmer has to choose sides on this day of all days. Protecting our sovereignty should be what Starmer is striving for, not abject surrender. And that's Mark in Selby. We'll take a quick break. After the break, more of your thoughts and calls. This is Talk.
was that, Mike? What was that?
Oh, my God. Well,
does this man have anyone protecting him in the media space? I mean, where's your publicist that steps in and says, we promised you 10 minutes, it's been 30?
Yeah.
I mean, I could go on and on when it comes to the contradictions, when it came to the oversharing.
Yeah.
This is the third time the man has told us that his father doesn't take his calls anymore, by the way. Don't forget, in the Netflix series, Meghan actually says Harry lost his dad.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the final part. This is Talk. We were talking about Alexa earlier. This is Julian in Dubai. What? Hi, Julie. We've got to the point where we actually laugh all the time about Alexa. If we want to know anything, we talk about whatever the subject is near our phones, and then we wait for the answer and information to arrive, which usually happens in less than 24 hours. I love the show. That's really good. I like that. Cliff in Berkshire, if Alexa isn't listening, how would it hear you say, hey, Alexa? Ooh, good. Like that. I wonder about Google too. It's too much of a coincidence that I got bombarded with weird adverts after having conversations about those items. I'm trying to think what my mum's story was, but it was funny because they were talking about something, but Alexa misheard and turned it into something quite rude, and then she got adverts about the quite rude thing, which made me laugh a lot. Now, Stuart in Perthshire says Alexa has to be constantly listening because otherwise she can't hear Wake Up Alexa. See, another one. Hi, David. If you have a machine in your home just waiting for you to utter its name, then surely you should be aware it's listening to all your conversations. It's not rocket science. Wow. Do you know, the other thing that I'm really struggling with is this idea you can drop in on a room. I think you just say, drop in, Alexa, and then Alexa mysteriously arrives in your room and can hear everything you're saying, unless I've got that wrong, but let me know. Peter's on the line from Somerset. Good afternoon.
Hello, David.
Hi.
I'm convinced we're being overheard. This is my brief story. It happened a week ago. I was sat in a pub with my daughter.
Yes.
And I said to her, last night I watched an old Sweeney program on the television, and she said, what the hell's that? And I said, it's a 70s police thing.
Yes.
And I was talking about the late, great John Thaw, and I said one of the lines in the script was he was moaning about young policemen who hadn't got the bottle. And he said, this young policeman said to me, well, I was quite frightened, Gov, but funny thing was, somebody peed my pants.
Right.
And 5 minutes later, my mobile phone went beep, beep. Are you looking for incontinent underwear?
Yes!
Absolutely true.
Is that right?
Don't anybody tell me we are not. I promise you, I'm not incontinent.
I wasn't suggesting you were.
Absolutely. My daughter looked at me. She said, oh, my God, I know we're being monitored. But that was it. Simply recalling that script, what John Thaw said, they were offering me incontinent underwear.
Peter, what a brilliant story. Thanks very much for sharing that. Peter in Somerset there. And talking of incontinence wear, Jeremy Carr.
I noticed on your belt you've got DG.
On my wear? Oh, yeah. How have you been looking at my belt?
What's the G for? D is for David. Is G a friend of yours?
Darling, it's a fashion
David and Goliath.
No, it's Dolce & Gabbana,
it's
darling.
Fake.
It's not actually
it
fake.
Genuinely is
it
fake.
Genuinely is. Unlike
fake.
that show, which clearly came from a pack of 12. Good afternoon.
Pack of 3.
Yeah, really.
How are you?
I'm delicious, thanks very much. I'm punch drunk because actually, after over a month of continual work, I actually have a week off.
You're joking. Where are you going?
I'm going home to see my house.
Are you?
I'm very excited about that.
Going to just relax.
Also, it's my birthday, so thanks for the present.
How old are you?
87.
When is your birthday?
Friday.
This Friday coming?
Indeed.
Come on, then. How old?
I shall be 56, Jeremy.
You look brilliant for 56.
That's very
I'm
kind.
60 in about 4 weeks' time.
You look great for 60.
You're such a lying bugger. So what's big today? Because I can't. I mean, listen, I had a nightmare trying to get in. I couldn't come in on the roads because that was jammed. I couldn't come in on the trains because everybody's on time and out.
Well, so we've had amazing stories about VE Day and actually sort of wartime memories and what people went through.
Proud of being British.
Exactly.
Good to hear.
Yes, we talked a lot about young people and actually the resurgence of pride in young people.
It's a good thing.
Also, migration. Obviously, that's come up again. The fact is the EU doesn't want to share any data.
What about the main story of the day? Reform banning woke flags. I think this is...
I haven't seen this.
Really? Reform UK councils will only be allowed to fly the Union Jack and the St George's Cross. The party chairman has just said.
Quite right. None of that funny stuff.
No, it's going to be thrown out. He said that his policy would include flagpoles, balconies, reception desks or council chamber walls. That is it. We control 10 councils, say Reform, and you will fly the Union Jack or the Cross of St George. Isn't that brilliant to hear on the day 80 years ago? Don't start me. Listen.
Fine.
No, I think it's great.
Good.
I'm sick and tired of having a government and a bunch of people who aren't proud of the fact that we're British, because you wouldn't bloody well be here if it wasn't for what happened 80 years ago.
100%. You are.
You're worrying about the time out.
I was just checking the time because
why do you worry about that?
Because sometimes you go off on a tangent.
I'm going
to.
Yeah,
reel you back.
It's okay. Don't worry. Listen, you've done that all your life. So reform bang
always
woke
following
flags.
in your footsteps. That's
Darling, what are you saying? And Farage's council's plan to end migrant hotels.
Yes.
As well. So we're going to close hotels, says Nigel Farage. We're going to ban any flag